Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now. From small-town grit to global acclaim, this man's vision reshaped the custom motorcycle world in more ways than one. In this episode of One Gang Worldwide, we sit down with the legend himself, Brian Klock of Klock Werks. Hear how his upbringing and early interests fueled a lifelong drive to build what he loved, not just what was cool at the time. Sit back, relax, and ride through innovation, heart, and horsepower with the one and only Brian Klock.
Listen, Jay, don't worry about it. You got this in the bag. I'm fixing to lose. He goes, what do you mean, Brian? I said, I'm building a bagger. And I'm going down. It's okay. I'm doing it my way.
Wow.
One Gang Worldwide podcast, brought to you by Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping. Since 1978, Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping has been a trusted name in transporting motorcycles safely across the country. With custom designed pallets and air ride trailers, your bike is secure and protected every step of the way. By choosing Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping, you're supporting a dedicated small business that prioritizes quality and customer satisfaction. Ship with a peace of mind, knowing your motorcycle is in expert hands. Visit keyboardmotorcycleshipping.com for more information. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
What's up, One Gang? We got a great show for you today, man. One of my heroes and one of the great men of our industry, Brian Klock. Thank you so much for joining us, man. Welcome on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Brian, we're excited to have you. Definitely. Thank you for joining us. We're a couple of fans, big time. So let's take it way back and start in the old days where you grew up. What was young Brian like before motorcycles?
Like every kid in America, once you get a bicycle, right, you can do whatever you want. You can go to your friend's house, you can sneak out, your parents can get mad at you, but you can also pedal yourself to baseball, you can take yourself to the swimming pool. And I grew up in a town of Emory, South Dakota, so it's probably 350 people, right? There was 14 kids in my graduating class. So it's a very farming, rural community. My dad sold seed corn. We owned the local gas station. We changed oil. We fixed the farmers' flat tires, their tractor tires. We hauled fuel out to their houses, which heated their houses in the middle of winter. And so through that, I was the kid who would, take an old tire and a board, and that became your ramp, and you did everything everybody did,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Had the local paper route. So we split that between me and my brother. And, the thing that you got in trouble for was sneaking into the bar in the back door of the bar and playing the video games, Asteroids or whatever it was at that point.
That's right. Pac-Man, Asteroids, right? Yeah.
And so, when that door slammed and Dad came in that back door because Mom knew you were there, so she sent him down there because it was only a block away from the gas station, and you had your papers there, but you weren't delivering them. And maybe the old lady on the corner called and told Mom she didn't get a paper yet. She'd been waiting for it, and so
that's so funny.
That's the kind of stuff, you're just that kid. But my dad always had the coolest cars, the coolest bikes, the coolest everything in our little town, and so all the guys would gather. Back in the era of 750 Hondas, they would gather at my dad's house, right? Mm-hmm. So, you're 10 years old or whatever, and there's every color of 750 Honda, from the 69 to the 76, right? They're all there. Nice. And my dad's riding a 1000 Goldwing, right? So then they would go on the ride. Same way in the wintertime, all the snowmobiles would gather in front of my dad's house, and they would go rip down the river, and all these older guys would go chasing around, and my dad had one of the fastest snowmobiles. It was just one of those things, right? Awesome. So you kind of learn from that. And as you gather momentum, if you will, and you're 14 years old, you can get your license in South Dakota. So I got to drive the dented gray rubber floor mat Chevy pickup. We called it the old gray bomb. It was a 1975, Sweet. But if you wanted to drive Dad's 79 or 82 or whatever that had the cool wheels on it and the one cool pinstripe and all the right accessories, you had to make sure Dad's truck was clean and that your old piece of crap truck was clean. If you don't care for it, even if it's a piece of crap, then you shouldn't deserve to drive it. You really don't.
Yeah.
You don't need to play, right?
Yeah, you were raised
and
right.
That's how he felt. And when he would come back in from farming, even we would wash and wax his tractor, right?
Man.
So when my dad sold his tractors, he always got more value and more money than what he even paid for the tractor originally because tractor prices kept
Yep.
going up. Somebody wanted his used one and only could afford the used one. My dad could buy the new one, right?
Right.
And
So,
so,
so you guys were the maintenance and the cleaning crew, right?
yeah, so you
You and your
learn that
brother.
from an early age, and I mean, I still have my first ever car, which was a 1970 Chevelle. It's an SS 396. I've owned it
Killer.
since I was 16 years old,
Wow.
It- It's gold with a
Yeah.
vinyl top, and it's my guys would come in and tell my dad, well, I used to have this Mustang. I used to have that, Thunderbird or whatever. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. Like,
Yeah.
I don't ever want to be that guy who says
Used
I
to.
had a 69 Camaro big block and I gave it away. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like, so now I still have my car. I have my grandma's 57 Chevy from one side of the family, and I have my other grandma's 64 Ford, which we're just putting the finishing touches on the other side.
Man.
I'm very much about history, about where we came from, and about where we're going.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, go into that. What was your first motorcycle that you got? Not the big bikes, but
I,
when you were a kid.
I had a 1971 Honda QA50, and it
Nice.
was green. They only made them in green,
Green.
red, and yellow. And now I own the green one and the red one again, and I'm looking for a yellow one. But my brother also, who lives in Arizona, has a green one, right? We all have very fond memories of the vacant lot between our house and the neighbor's house. And I would take that bike out there, and we would literally, I probably was in fourth grade, right? We'd drive around in a circle, right? We had a track war in there, and the neighbor kids would come over, and I would charge them like a nickel to ride the bike, right? So they would go rides on the bikes. Well,
That's
then next thing
awesome.
you know, four of them gave me 4 nickels. Well, now I had 20 cents. So then I ride my pedal bike down to Main Street, and I could buy a comic book, I could buy bubble gum, I could buy whatever
Right,
candy I
right.
wanted, from the little sundry store. But, I didn't know that that was, a big deal. Now I realize that I was probably always destined to be an entrepreneur. I was always destined to run a business or destined to do what my dad did, which was, he was kind of the jack of all, master of none. He ran the tire shop. He sold Pioneer seed corn for 50 years. My
Man.
mom was just the quietest, nicest, hardest working lady you could ever meet. If dad said, "Hey, we got to pick the rocks out of this, soybean field," she would load all the kids up and you'd run out there and either drive the pickup down the rows or drive the tractor down the rows, and you'd pick rocks and put them in the loader, and mom was right there working with you the whole time.
Right.
And
Right.
meanwhile, today somebody just called CPS on some guy in a small town for letting his, I think, 11-year-old drive his pickup truck on his property.
Yeah, no, that would be exactly what you do,
Uh,
because when you were
right.
the young kid,
I was raised too.
of you got tired of doing the whole thing. You would just literally get in the truck, right?
Hmm.
And mom would say, "Well, I'll walk, pick rocks. You drive the truck, right?
Hmm.
Because you're tired, right?" Well, you were just the youngest kid. That's all it was.
Yep.
Who taught you? Who taught you how to ride at a young age?
My dad,
Your
without.
dad. All right. So
Oh yeah, I mean the neighbor kid across the way. I mean, he still stops into this day. I mean, he's probably 10 years older than me, right? And but he has an affiliation and a remembrance of my dad, because my dad had a 1970 Chevy pickup that they took to Sturgis, and this guy had a Honda 90. Okay, he put a Honda 90, my dad's 61 Panhead, and a Honda 350, all in the back of this 1970 Chevy pickup.
wow.
Jeez.
And these two guys rode in the back of the pickup because mom and dad rode in the front. And then they took them all to Sturgis, right?
Hmm.
And so, those guys there was always kids in my neighborhood. There was always guys who were older than me that had the cool cars, that had the cool motorcycles, and, so.
That
Yeah.
was the beauty of growing up, man. Back in our era, it was just the fact that we were always outside, we were always involved, getting our hands dirty, trying to find things from bicycles to motorcycles to cars and transitioning on. There was no phones to keep us, or all this social media crap to keep us away from that stuff. So
Yeah, my wife and I just bought 15 acres of land on the other side of the lake from Mitchell. It was an old seat manufacturing plant, if you
Oh,
will.
mhm.
cool.
But Cargo, our 4-year-old son, loves to get out there and just run, right? Just go do whatever,
Nice.
right?
Hmm.
So he has a little, battery powered Jeep thing. He has his
Nice.
bicycle, his Striders. He's riding up and down the driveway, and he's got
Striders
a
are
dirt bike.
awesome.
He's getting ready to ride his dirt bike. He wants to get out there and play, but he also likes to go for rides in the Razor or the Ranger and drive those around. And I mean, so we're trying to give him that same experience where he can just
Awesome,
roam
man.
free on 15 acres of land and do what he wants,
That's right.
Yeah,
So
That's right.
that's the best. So many kids miss out on that. And it's cool too, talking about small town America, 350 people in your town, but people who are maybe more urban or city dwellers, they don't realize that a lot of times in the smaller population or populated towns, a lot of people still have, there's lots of classic cars, lots of motorcycles, like more than you would expect. And it's cool to hear that all your dad's buddies would show up in the small town, but you still have a yard full of motorcycles. That's pretty incredible. So you
yeah,
grew up.
and
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
go ahead.
After
No, go
you.
ahead.
Okay, so I was just gonna bring it back a little bit too. So you grew up around your parents' gas station.
Yeah.
What did that environment teach you about work ethic, community, or even business without you realizing it yet?
The biggest key was that my dad was the guy who would save the day. Okay. And so
That's
um,
cool.
a couple would be driving down the interstate with their kids and their car broke down. They're out on the interstate and it's a blizzard. My dad would go out there. He would somehow get that car towed back into town. And that couple would end up being at our house because there's no hotel in Emory, South Dakota, obviously. And so mom would say, okay, you guys all got to sleep in the same room tonight. These guys are going to take Brian's room. And so they're all going to join us for dinner. You better be nice to their kids and, da da da. Right. Well, that was who my dad was. He was the save the day guy. He actually made extra money when he was younger because he didn't own the gas station right away. He was buying it from a mentor of his. His
Okay.
dad died when he was, I believe, 18 years old. His mom died when he was 15. So
Wow.
he's kind of left to be on his own, right?
Hmm.
And so everybody said, well, that kid's a troublemaker and he just doesn't get it. He's never going to amount to anything. And this guy named Hit Mayor, ED, his nickname was Hit for Hitler, right? And
Wow.
he is going to, he'll take care of Roger. And he said, well, Roger's going to be great, and I'm going to take a gamble on him. Well, my dad did end up being great, but Hit believed in him, maybe more than my dad even believed in himself at that point. And so he told Hit that he said, I want to go out when there's after hours calls. A farmer needs fuel and he's in his field and he needs fuel right now and he's destitute.
Hmm.
When the heater goes out in the middle of winter, I want to go out and light the pilot for them and put the fuel in the lines and I can do it. I'll take all those extra calls. So it was his
Get
drive
to
to
be
go
the
extra,
hero.
extra to make the money, right?
Hmm.
But then he also saved the day. So while he's out there filling the fuel, he gets a relationship with these people.
Yeah.
And suddenly those are the same people that come in years later and buy seed corn from him, right?
Hmm.
Because he was good to them once, he'll be good to them always, right?
Hmm.
And my dad was very loyal like that. He believed in and understood the power of relationships. And so guys would come in that gas station just to catch up on what's the news in the town, what's going
Hmm.
on. And I need this flat tire fixed off my grain cart, right? And then they just grab a Coke and a Snickers or something from the candy bar that was there,
That's
and
awesome.
they would sit there and hang out, right? But then
Hmm.
I also years later realized that when they were in there paying their bill, and my dad would close the door and he'd be in his office, and sometimes I'd be sitting in there in the chair. Um, they came to my dad for life advice,
Wow.
Really?
for
Wow.
advice with their kids, for advice with what's going on, for
Man.
not understanding the financial pitfall that they were in and how they were going to get out of it. And my dad was the guy who always had like a note underneath his desk calendar, right? And I remember when he was finally starting to sell the shop and he was retiring, I said, Dad, what is this? Oh, that's just a payment schedule.
Hmm.
For what, Dad? Well, for that guy's truck. I said, wait a minute. You own that guy's truck? Are you kidding me? Well, how many more things you got like this? And he goes, I don't know, Brian. Does it really matter? Like,
Huh.
he goes, at the end of the day, you're not going to take it with you. And he goes, but he'll make
Ah,
his payments. It'll
man.
be fine. He's doing good.
Hmm.
And
That's
so,
incredible, man.
so he was always that guy. And I find myself When people ask me, what is Clockworks, right? I say it's a wayward home for boys and girls. Um, Nobody's life is perfect. Nobody's family's perfect. Nobody is
Right.
perfect, right? We all come from broken something. Something happened, something went wrong, someone broke our heart, something, whatever the case is, right?
Mhm.
And so I feel like Clockworks is that place, right? And that's what makes this team so strong. It's made our brand so incredible. It's made people so loyal that people want to just continue to, um, desire whatever we have. And with that, whatever
It's,
we have is just
yeah,
family. It's
yeah.
just
It
Brand.
seems like, yeah, you
Real
took
loyalty.
on. Hey guys, we're excited to announce our first giveaway.
We're teaming up with Leather Up to hook you up.
One lucky listener gets a $150 gift card and a featured spot on the podcast.
Enter now at cyclesworldwide.com for your chance to win.
What's up, One Gang? I used to think that if I spent big money on riding gear with a logo on the back, I was getting top quality. I gave Leather Up a shot. I wasn't sure at first, could I really get quality gear without spending a fortune? But after putting tens of thousands of miles on their jackets and vests, I had my answer. No busted zippers, no loose stitching, just solid, well-made gear that lasts. Leather Up carries trusted brands like Milwaukee Leather, Hot Leathers, and more, with gear for every rider and every budget. Plus, their customer service actually cares and picks up the phone, something rare these days. So do yourself a favor, check out leatherup.com. Whether you need jackets, vests, chaps, boots, helmets, or luggage, they've got you covered. And because you're part of the One Gang Worldwide family, use code CW20 at checkout for 20% off your entire order. Stop overpaying, gear up with Leather Up, and see the difference yourself.
On a lot of that stuff that your dad taught you and that you learned from growing up. So that's so awesome, man. And
Yeah.
and getting a chance to follow you for a long time in this thing and just listening to the things that you've talked about and other situations where you've had a camera on you. I mean, you never waver. That's what we truly love about you. But let's get back to one of these things. All right, so you remember the first time you kind of got your hands dirty on a real bike build? When was that? And take us a little bit into that moment when and what that project meant to you.
Well, so I got a Honda 400 when I was 14 years old, right? And it was brand new, my first brand new motorcycle, right? And I could ride it wherever I wanted to as long as I stayed out of town because dad didn't want me popping the clutch, pulling the wheelie, just trying to do a burnout or whatever, riding
Being
too
a
fast
kid.
on the city street. Right? You
Yeah.
got to go out of town, get out of town, right? Because everybody came to the gas station, they just kept telling on me, And
Right.
so if I did it, he was going to hear about it.
Yeah.
And but you got to remember there's, 14 kids in your class, right? I wasn't the smartest kid and I wasn't the slowest kid, right? So it was kind of in the middle. But I also just wasn't paying attention. Like I could read something and I could take a test and pass it, no problem. But if you asked me 2 months later, or even 2 weeks later, I probably couldn't tell you what I even learned, right? I just had a incredible short-term memory that served me well and was also a deficit.
Right.
So I'm the kid that's drawing pictures and doodling on the side of my paper. And it just so happens that the principal came in one day and he said, hey, you need to come to the office. And I'm like, oh man, I don't even know what I did, right? So I'm there, and it's lunchtime, and he pulls me in right before lunchtime, and he hands me a camera and a owner's manual for it. And he said, I need you to take this home, and you're going to go to journalism camp. And I said, I'm not going to journalism camp. I don't know how to run that camera. I'm super shy. I don't want to room with anybody. Like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. He goes, no, I've already talked to your parents. You probably just take the camera home and talk to your parents. Well, I only live 2 blocks away, so it was easy to run home for lunch, right? So I just ran home for lunch. I took that camera, and my parents are like, yeah, he asked us. He thinks you're very artistic and thinks you might have a future in this. We're going to go ahead and send you.
Wow.
Well, I was terrified. I didn't want to go to Brookings, South Dakota, to SCSU, to the college campus and do all these things. And I certainly didn't know anything about cameras. My parents weren't camera people, nothing, right?
Right.
So I went there, and in 1 week, I not only learned how to use a 35 millimeter camera, but I was able to print and develop my own photos. That was before
Jeez.
digital, right?
How old were you?
So 16 maybe.
Wow.
So now all of a sudden, I've got this skill, 15 actually. I was
Okay.
15 because now I got sucked into the school newspaper and the school annual. And now I'm taking pictures of all the basketball games and all these events that I went to anyway, all these sporting things, because I had asthma since I was 5 years old. So I couldn't run a block. My brothers were all state quarterbacks, all state basketball, all state
Oh,
chorus, all
man.
state everything. And I just basically fell behind or hid behind in some cases the asthma, right?
Gosh. Yeah.
And so I couldn't do anything. Well, this was my gift. This was my calling.
Mhm.
Years later, I'm writing my own articles for Tim Remus's books, for magazines. I'm taking pictures in the back of the shop, and I'm sending these photos to Bassani. And so, like, if I showed you
Man.
a certain few years of Bassani catalog, it was all shot right back here in the parking lot.
No
Huh.
shit. Wow.
And so,
That's cool.
but
That's
I
a great
wouldn't
story.
have known how to do that, if it wasn't for that move, right?
hmm
And so as I, aged up, I got a 750 Honda or 750 Yamaha Virago, I should say. And then my dad one day took it on a trip to the Black Hills, and he called me and I was doing the books at the gas station. And he said, "Hey, your mom and I are having a great vacation. I hope the gas station's going great. Um, I just want you to know your bike's kind of too small." I said, "Yeah, too small for you, Dad,
Right.
not for me." And he goes, "Well, I went to the Honda dealer here and I traded off your motorcycle." He said, "You traded off my motorcycle?" He's like, "Yeah, I got a new Aspencade Goldwing." And I said, "What am I going to do?" And he goes, "Well, I'm going to give you mine."
Sweet.
Well, just what every 98-pound weakling, 17-year-old kid wants is a Honda
Right.
Gold.
It's a big
hmm
gold wing.
How dumb is this? So I became a bagger guy at age 17, right? And I was
Jeez.
riding around, and my cousin would get on the back, and he was enough ballast that we could wheelie that thing down Main Street. But
Those things are boats, man.
yeah, but much to my dad's chagrin, I became this bagger guy. Well, then as I aged up and I was going to college, I went to college for journalism, for radio, for TV. My uncle went there and did that. And then I thought, man, wouldn't that be cool? He's my coolest uncle. He owns a radio station. And I didn't really want to go to college. We didn't really have advisors. I didn't really know what I was doing. But the local church would pay $500 towards my college tuition, right? If I went to this school. So I did.
Okay.
And it was only an hour away, and I could still run home and help dad on the weekends and
Cool.
deliver seed corn or work on the farm, do whatever we were doing, right?
hmm
And so I got 2 years into this journalism, radio, TV thing, realized I don't want to be in front of the camera. I want to be behind the camera. I like the radio side of it. It helped me kind of get over my shyness. I was sitting in a college classroom, and all of a sudden somebody said, "Hey, have you been listening to that program on Saturday nights?" And they're like, "Yeah, I don't even understand. I don't know who that guy is. I don't, because you use an alias.
You're right.
And so they didn't know it was me, and I'm sitting right here, and they're really digging what I'm doing and the music that I'm playing and the program that I'm putting out,
Man.
but they don't know it's me, right? And so that just helped me kind of get over that, right? And next thing you know,
Right.
I'm filming college basketball games, and I'm hanging out with some of the senior basketball guys or football guys or whatever the case was, and I'm learning things the whole time. Meanwhile, through the grate in my dorm room, because I had my own dorm room because I might be allergic to something somebody else had, or if they slept with a down pillow or all that stuff, right? I still was that asthmatic kid.
Wow.
Right.
I could hear Coach Bob Young through the grate mentoring kids, right?
Oh,
Telling these
cool.
young men about their lives, about their relationships, about their families, about their finances, right? And I didn't know that, but in that I was basically listening to my dad.
Man.
But this guy had a faith background that was so huge, right?
hmm
And I thought, man, that guy's amazing. He just has a heart for people. He opens the door for everybody. He always says hi to you, even if he doesn't know you. And, fast forward some 25 years later, Bob Young walks in my motorcycle shop. And Laura and I were getting a divorce at the time. And I literally just started crying.
Really?
And he goes, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm not okay." I said, "I know Gordon Fosness. He's one of the pillars of our community and was a basketball coach at the local college." And I said, But you, Coach Young, I never expected you to walk in this door.
Man.
And I said, I just want to tell you thanks. And he goes, thanks for what, Brian? I said, I learned a lot from you in college.
Man.
I said, what do you mean? You didn't play football for me, did you? I said, no. Coach, I said, I was right above your office in the Glidden Hall.
God.
And I heard you educating kids and just pouring into other people, not focusing on you, but focusing on others. And I owe you.
Wow.
He would stop in every time he was coming through town to check on the local football players or the basketball players, because he was now a big shot with Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
At one point, he stopped in and he was asking me about my divorce and how I was struggling with it. And he gave me a book to read that now I've probably given to, I don't know, I would guess 20, 25 other people.
What book is it, Brian?
It's by Dr. James Dobson, and it's the title of it escapes me right now, but it's like it's basically like love hurts, like it's gonna hurt, right?
Mm.
And it's how to say no and how to set healthy boundaries for yourself, because you can get caught into trying to help the other person or helping the other, like, hey, I still want you in my life, right? Well,
Right.
at some point I have to say I have to step out of your life because it's not good for me. It's not good for you. It's not good for anybody.
Love must be tough.
A clean break, And anyway, I just gave it to a guy recently, and so
Is
my
it
head's
Love
kinda-
Must Be Tough?
Yeah, that's it.
There you go.
You're right. Good capture. That's it. Love Must Be Tough by Dr. James Dobson. So I'll buy it on Amazon. I'll send it to whomever's house, and it's for relationships that are in trouble, right?
Mm.
And sometimes it can help you save the relationship. Other times it just helps you walk away from the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned again from that it's about relationships, right? My relationship with Coach Bob Young spanned 25 years, but now he's back in my life. Well, that's all in God's perfect timing. That has nothing to do with me. That has nothing I ordained. It's just, there's a plan. You just don't know what the plan is, or you're not willing to listen because you think you're in control.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to go to journalism camp, right, plays out years later.
How
right?
that transpired is crazy.
Yeah, for me to watch all those people at my dad's shop and understand what the customer wanted, what they feel, whether it's their flat tire or their radiator or their fan belt, or whether it's just taking a case of Coca-Cola bottles out to Nancy Weber's car and putting it in the trunk because Larry drank a case of Coca-Cola bottles every week. And when Nancy would come in, I knew what she wanted. I would walk out to her car and be a gentleman because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I'd take the empty bottles out and I'd bring the full ones out, right? But it was the gas station where you still wash the windshield.
Right. Clean the windshield, check the oil.
You check the tires, So now when we go on the road and we stop at a gas station, I'm all about efficiencies. And so I tell my team, I'm like, if you're the co-pilot, your job is to get out, check the motorcycles in the trailer, check all the tires on the trailer, wash the windshield. I'm going to fill fuel. Okay.
Your pit crew.
You have to go to the bathroom before you do that. That's fine. You go to the bathroom, but then you got to come back and do that. Because as soon as I'm done filling, I'm going to go to the bathroom and we're out of here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask me what I want to drink or what I want on my hot dog, but we're going to keep moving. Right. Because we don't need to waste 25 minutes here. It's going to kill us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when I clean the windshield, the guys are like, man, you clean it better than anybody. I'm like, well, here's the trick. You scrub the windshield, you squeegee it off, you grab that paper towel that's in the squeegee machine because you just wipe the blade and make it dry. Wipe the blade, make it dry. Every swipe, okay?
Yeah.
You'll get rid of all the streaks and all the drips. It's that simple, guys. So I think, life gives you so many lessons. It's just, what are you willing to reflect on? What are you willing to try to not fix? Because you can't fix yesterday. You can control today and your attitude, and you can try to plan for tomorrow. But you cannot fix yesterday. So if you wronged someone yesterday, if you hurt someone yesterday, if someone hurt you yesterday, get over it. Don't play the victim mentality. There's nothing you can do. You can't fix it.
Amen.
God
Brian,
has
can I ask you a question?
And that's the plan.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question regarding
Please.
that? Just real briefly. Did you always live with that kind of a mindset because it was taught, or was it something that you kind of learned over time as you went through some troubles and some pains and things
I
like that?
learned it over time. I was a problem kid. I went through tons of relationships. I didn't know what I was doing or why I wanted to do it. I didn't understand it. I mean, when I got my first Harley, right, it was, you know, I was probably 2 years out of high school, just in college, right? And I wanted to buy this bike, and it was like, I don't know, like $4,000 or something. It was an
Yeah.
FXR, right? We went to this guy's house, and he had pulled the emblems off of it. The license plate was on upside down. And because the guy got busted for DUI, that's why he was selling it, right?
Mm.
He was just a full-on classic drunk.
Right.
And I bought it and I brought it home and I took it all apart, and I had a friend of mine and we painted the tank of the two fenders red and the side covers. And man, these old guys come in, and this one particular Yamaha guy's like, "You just wrecked that motorcycle. You ruined the value of it. It's not gonna be worth anything now." I rode that bike for a year and I sold it for $800 more than I paid for it.
Okay. Right.
There might be something to this Harley
There
thing.
could be something to
Might
it.
be making it look different than everybody else's, right?
That
And so, go ahead.
good after you.
So the next year I bought another one, and I went ahead and, got that all ready to go, right? And I rode that bike to Daytona from South Dakota. Okay.
Man.
We left here in March, and the bank clock said 20 degrees. Okay. Well, 20 degrees when you're riding a motorcycle at 75, 80 miles an hour is super, super cold, right? So we've got our our snowmobile stuff on, our gloves on, our face masks on, under our helmets, 16 layers of clothes, whatever it took, We'd ride 100 miles at a crack, try to warm up in a gas station. We even one point drafted behind this guy in his Winnebago because it was blocking all the wind from us. And he knew what we were doing because we stopped at the next gas station, and so did he. And he goes, "Hey, I saw you guys back there. I'll try to tap the brakes a couple times if we're going to slow down, just so
That's
you know."
great.
Right? I'm like,
That's
perfect,
great.
thank you.
Heck yeah.
And so again, it's a chance meeting in a gas station, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a relationship formed, and we know what not to do and what to do. And we've got this kind of nonverbal understanding between us and that guy that we're going to go for it, right?
Right.
We end up in Daytona that year. The cold front followed us the whole way. We didn't take off a layer until we got to Georgia. And I tried to go in a gas station. The guy goes, "Wait, wait, wait." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "You can't go in there with your mask on. We have a mask law here,
Yeah.
and you'll get busted." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I didn't know," right?
Yep.
And this is, before everybody had a cell phone and all this kind of stuff,
Right.
right?
Of course.
We're riding down there on this. I'm on an FXR. My buddies are both on Yamahas, and so they would get behind me in draft because my FXR was bigger than their Yamahas. And if the wind was coming from this direction, they would just offset. So their front wheel was by my back wheel. And so the wind would kind of, whatever direction the wind was coming from, we were blocking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And riding uniform like that, I got down there and I'm at the Rat's Hole show. And I'm looking over Arlen Ness's Ferrari bike. So he had built this bike that had Ferrari sides on it, and like a 50, a car tire, a 50 series car tire, right? And it was dual blowers on it, the whole thing. And I was just amazed by this bike. And I'm crawling around it, looking at it. Well, I looked at it days before at another show, right? And Arlen came up and he goes, "You really like this bike, huh, kid?" I said, "I really do." I said, "It's so impressive, sir." He goes, "Where are you from?" I said, "South Dakota." He goes, "Oh my God, I bet that was a cold ride." I said, "You're dang right it was." And he goes, "I was joking. You really rode your motorcycle from South Dakota in March?" I said, "I did, but it was cold, sir." And he goes, "Well, good on you. What kind of bike you ride?" I said, "An FXR." He goes, "Well, those are great bikes. Those are great bikes. I love FXRs." And I said, "Well, this is an impressive bike." He goes, "Well, good on you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your vacation." And, I said, "Thanks." Well, I would meet up with Arlen like that numerous times over my lifetime, right?
Mm.
And so one time I was in Sturgis and I had finished my FXR, and I'll come back to that. But Arlen walked up and I'm out there studying the Mona Lisa bike. That bike had skirts and things that were purple that you could put on right? It's kind of a blue purple fade. With Zeus fasteners, which now I know are race car type things, but you can put these Zeus fasteners on, put these side skirts on, and almost had a full body feel like an old Indian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But in this case, he had them off and he was hot rodding around Sturgis with his buddies. And I was crawling underneath his bike trying to figure out where he mounted his regulator. And he walked up behind me and he goes, "Hey, kid, you find everything you're looking for?" And I'm like, "I did, sir. I'm sorry." And I backed up. He goes, "No, you're fine." He goes, "That's a cool shirt you got on." And I looked down and I'm wearing my Arlen Ness t-shirt.
Yeah.
Corey Ness and Arnie Rujo and some of the guys that he hung out with from Northern California were right behind us, and they had started up their bikes. And he was getting ready to get on his, and he said, "Do you still have an FXR?" I said, "I do, sir. And one day I want to take a picture with you by it." I said,
You remember.
"It's actually in there." And it was in the Rats Hole show in the Sturgis City Park.
Dang.
And he goes, "Well, let's just do it right now." I said, No, it's a long ways. You got to walk down the fence and back in, and your guys are ready to go. He goes, "No, let's do it right now." And he looked over those guys and told them to shut their bikes off. Okay.
Wow.
Wow.
He truly was one of the greatest gentlemen of our industry. Okay. He didn't slight you. He didn't walk by like his ego was too big. He literally walked all the way down the fence, all the way back around, in by my bike. And he goes, "I recognize a few parts on this." I said, "Yeah, it's pretty much your whole catalog, sir." I said, "I'm a fan." And he goes, "Well, this
That's
is a great
awesome,
bike
man.
and you did a great job. Thank you for inviting me to come in and take a look."
Nice.
And so
Nice.
he made it more about me and less about him. And we as humans in that moment forget to listen. Like Arlen Ness,
Mhm.
he listened. He just
Right.
wanted to know where you're at, what you were doing. It was less about Arlen Ness and more about you, right?
That's right.
He had a way to make you feel special all the time. Okay. Now back to my FXR. I rode that first one, sold it, made $800. I rode the other one all the way to Daytona, put 8,000 miles on that bike that year, and sold it for $1,000 more. Thought it's never going to get bigger than this. This is the 50th of Sturgis. Bikes are crazy. You got to wait at dealers forever to get a motorcycle. It's just not going to happen. So I buy two Yamaha FZR 600s, one for me and one for the girl I was dating at the time, was riding it. And mine was all hot rodded and hopped up. I go out to Sturgis and I'm coming down the road from Mount Rushmore into Keystone. And a guy from one of the clubs comes ripping up beside me and tries to kick me off my motorcycle.
Mm.
So I'm not going to let that happen. So I don't really know club etiquette from a hole in my head
Right.
at that point. We probably
Right.
passed them. We probably shouldn't have. I go ripping through Keystone. This guy's chasing me and I lose him, right?
Jeez.
By the time the rest of my buddies caught up with me, they're like, "Wow, that was scary." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know what to do." Right? It's just, I had to get rid of him. Right? So I'm riding the bike down Main Street, Sturgis later that week, and a guy steps off the curb and tries to knock me off my bike.
Jeez.
And I'm like,
Wow.
"This sucks." Right? Like, I mean, there's such a hate for metric motorcycles, but you got to remember it's the 50th. We're now at the 85th or whatever it is,
That's
right?
right.
So
That's right.
like, it's a long time gone, right? But I've been going to Sturgis since I was 8 years old. My parents would take me out there because my family lived in Spearfish. And so even if we just drove through Sturgis and went to Spearfish and hung out with family, my dad would go back into Sturgis, right?
Right.
But I've always been around that.
Mhm.
So I sold one of the bikes on my uncle's lawn that week, right? I sold the other one when I got home. But that week I was hanging around Drag Specialties truck and Ski and Tom Motzko and all the guys are there and they're answering all my questions. And then I go downtown and Jim Betlock, who also worked for Drag at the time, was down there. And he was parked in front of Two Wheelers Denver Arlen shop, right? Two Wheelers motorcycle right on the Main Street Sturgis, right? They always had one in Deadwood, or one in Daytona, and one in Sturgis. And he always kind of parked his bikes kind of crooked so that if his Hamster buddies or some other guys that he
Couldn't
knew
move them.
showed up, they could put their cool bikes there because it would just draw people to his store.
Yep.
Right.
So Jim's bike was in front of there. I'm out there crawling around, and Jim's daughter, Darcy, who has done a ton in the motorcycle world herself, says, "Dad, why don't you go out and talk to that kid?" She was the same age as me. He came out there. He answered all my questions. Later on that week, he got back to Drake Specialties, and he sent me a fax, and it was thermal paper, so it rolled up. It
Yeah.
came
That's right.
out. For those of you that remember that.
Yep.
Back in the day, yeah, man.
So it had all the parts that you could ever use for an FXR from Drag Specialties on this sheet, right?
Cool.
And so he advised me to buy a police bike, okay? Because Harley rated the motors A, B, and C, and the A motors always went in the police bikes because the last thing what they want a cop to do is be sitting on the side of the road, okay? So that looks bad for their brand.
Absolutely.
So I called the local dealer and he had a police bike, okay? And it was his personal bike. He'd ridden it 5,000 miles. So I was able to buy this police bike used in October with 5,000 miles on it, okay? I brought it home and I rode it 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, and then I tore it all apart. My dad was so pissed off at me. I bought a brand new motorcycle for maybe $7,500, right? And I was stupid enough to take it all apart. That bike sat apart for the next 2 years.
Oh, jeez.
Really?
I couldn't afford
Really?
the parts that I wanted, whether it was a PM brake or a Del Orto carb. A Del Orto carb now sells for $2,000 or something.
Right.
And
Super expensive.
at that time, it was $500. Well, $500 was a ton of money to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Google, we didn't have all this stuff. So I literally laid out every hot bike, Easy Rider, Super Cycle magazine I could find on the floor in the living room, and I would go through them and I would go, man, I like this about this bike. I don't like this about that bike. This is a cool idea. That's a cool trick. And I was just filling my brain with stuff. And so over the course of 2 years, I built the bike. I remember distinctly taking that frame after talking to Leo Hess at Full Blast Engineering. Leo has raced nitro bikes. He has raced his drag bike at Bonneville. Really, truly a local legend for a kid like me, right? And he's just in Sioux Falls, so he's an hour away. I asked him, I said, if you're going to rake a motorcycle, how would you do it, right? And he goes, well, I would just find one of the guys who's really good at it, like Donny Smith, right? I'm like, Donny Smith, like the guy I read about in the magazines, like that Donny Smith? He's like, yeah, he's in Minneapolis. I'll give you his number. I called Donny Smith. He said he would rake my frame. I put it in my mom's 1976 Monte Carlo, 77 Monte Carlo. Swivel buckets, red and white, all the cool stuff. But the trunk was huge, right? So I could lay my frame on my bike in my mom's trunk. And I drove that car then to Minneapolis and pulled up to Donnie's house. He and Rob Rail were at that time building bikes in his garage, a 3-car garage kind of behind his house. It was like 2 in an extra stall. And so I went in there and I was scared to death, right? Rob is a big dude. He comes out. I mean, I took everything I had to pick this frame up out of there, and he carries it under one arm like it's a
groceries.
I tell them what I want. I tell them what I want to do, and they said, those are good ideas. And I brought up a Kawasaki Ninja Gas Cap. It didn't have Kawasaki on it. Yamaha once said Yamaha on them, and I wanted that gas cap to be my gas cap, right? And I just said that completely backwards. I brought up a Yamaha gas cap. I was going to fill in the Yamaha letters, and I did not want a Ninja one because it kind of flipped up. It had a little bit of a kick up. And I told him what I want to do with the tank, and I said I really was hoping that I could somehow make the taillight look like the side markers on my 70 Chevelle. There are 2 little lines that go in the front.
Yep.
If I could make it look like that, that'd be cool. Donnie goes, I can totally do that for you. He goes, I'll tell you what, here's an idea. You can slide your fender on, and I can build the struts out so you can put the bolts in from the inside, and it'll look like it has fake struts on the outside, but it'll smooth to the fender. It'll just slide on the back of the FXR frame. I'm doing one for a friend of mine and one for the head of the Hells Angels here in Minneapolis, Pat Matter, and I'll do one for you.
Dang.
I'm like, wow, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like there's going to be 3 of these things and I get to have one?
Wow.
Donny Smith and I hit it off, and to this day, Donny Smith is like my dad in this industry. Really? He has answered every dumb question I had, whether it was about picking colors or just how to mount my carburetor or brace it or anything, to running with the wrong crowd. Donnie would call me out on it. And so Donnie's also the guy in 1999 who came up to me in Laughlin, Nevada and said, would you ever want to be a hamster? And I said, would you ever want to graduate from law school? Yeah. And he goes, well, we haven't let anybody in for a couple years, so it might be a little while, but the guys are looking and they're paying attention to your bikes and we have some interest. I said, okay, well, thanks. I appreciate that. Right. He would always tell me prior to that, Brian, we're going to this bar. We're going to meet here. We're meeting all the guys. We're going to be there at 1. I would go to that bar. I would never go in and have a drink. I would just sit outside and look at all the bikes, because nowhere were you going to get that level of bikes to study in person. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was just it was a treat for me to be around them, to be educated by them.
Man, it's legends. Legends.
I'm friends with Arlen Ness, and he's just answering my questions. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm very fortunate to have been in the right place at the right time. I never wanted to have my personal FXR in a magazine. I turned down the option a million times, right?
Yep.
I didn't want to be famous. I didn't want people to know, because what if I couldn't build another one? It took me 2 years to build this one, right? What if somebody called me and said, I want you to do one for me? And I just can't, right? I started to build a turbo bagger for my dad, and it was 1997, and the bike was like a 1994. So I took it all apart, painted it candy blue, put an Aerocharger turbo on it, and Aerocharger invited me to bring it to SEMA. Okay, so now I get to go to SEMA, the world's largest car, truck, cool kid show, and I've been there a lot, so I knew what to do. And I brought the bike there, and it's in their booth, and I'm hanging out with it. And here comes Arlen Ness. And he goes, Brian, is this yours? I said, yeah. And he goes, this is a great bike. Wow, what a cool build. This is amazing.
That's
Jim
gotta
Betlop,
be
Great
crazy.
Specialties, comes by with Tom Motzko. Brian, this is a great bike. Man, what a cool build, right? So I'm getting noticed by all these guys who are hamsters. I'm not a hamster, right? But I just wanted to make my dad proud of me, right? I just wanted
That's
to
cool.
make, I
Of
couldn't
course.
play basketball or football like my brothers. I couldn't do all those things. And I knew my dad was into this stuff. And if my dad could see me being at SEMA, maybe he would get it, right? My dad never understood my global mentality. My dad never understood how I could want to be gone all the time, or how I thought I could compete at a national level, right? But yet I saw guys like Donny Smith and Arlen Ness and Mallard Teal, all these guys from Minneapolis doing it. And when I would put my bike in the Rats Hole show, man, if I would get 4th, I already thought I won.
Yeah.
I broke into the top 10, right?
Mm-hmm. Those legends.
And I always kind of was this little kid who had this big mentality that what if you were going to win the Super Bowl, right? What if? Like, I could probably do that, right? And so to be at SEMA and getting that attention was huge, right? I just kept going. And then finally, it happened that my mentor ended up being John Patton. John Patton was interested in the turbo.
Mm-hmm.
He had come down to the Yamaha shop where we were building my FXR with my friend Scott Studer, who took me under his wing and let me sell V-twin parts in his Yamaha-related motorcycle business, right? Because it's in Mitchell, South Dakota. That there's only so many places you can get Harley parts, right?
Right.
So I opened the original drag accounts with Scott, got all these parts coming in from whomever, and John Patton said, you're never going to finish that bagger here at this shop because there's too many distractions. Why don't you bring it to my house? Well, John at that point was getting a divorce, and I didn't know that, but he needed me as much as I needed him. First thing I said to John was, I need to make this official, and we should probably get like a tax license. We're going to get in trouble. We're putting in cams for people. We're changing their oil now in the garage at late at night. And so 1997, I got my first tax license as Clockworks, right?
Mm-hmm.
My logo was the word clock, and the O had like this, thing at 5 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, that's a cool logo. And the first concern I had was to get health insurance. I couldn't pay the rent. I couldn't pay myself building these motorcycles. I was basically it was a service to people, and I enjoyed it, right? And John needed health insurance. I needed health insurance. I'd gotten into a jet ski accident and busted up my leg, and that cost me a lot of money because I didn't have health insurance. So it left a huge impression on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I did before I even worried about a salary was I just wanted to get health insurance.
Yep.
Lucky I did. 6 months later, John got diagnosed with cancer.
Gosh, man.
How was it that I was a young kid who probably should have been more concerned about paying myself, right? But I got into a jet ski accident, and that cost me a lot of money that I didn't have. So I wanted to get health insurance. Well, it was because John needed health insurance, right? Again, God had a perfect plan. I just didn't know what it was, right?
That's wild. Yeah.
I was making choices, but I didn't even know how or why or what happened next or anything, right?
Mhm.
Right.
And so as you go through life, you realize that relationships are everything, right? And don't burn that bridge. You may come back there. You may go work there again one day. You may realize that was the best job you ever had, or you love that team, right? And so John Patton taught me that through just being good to me and me being good to him. Okay. Fast forward, and now guys are saying, I got $400 I want to spend on my motorcycle. What would you do? I'm like, well, if I were you, I would do this, right? And I wouldn't pick grips or pegs or an air cleaner cover, because that's the stuff they were going to go to the local aftermarket shop or local Harley shop and get themselves and put on themselves, right?
Right.
And so many people picked out stuff that didn't match, wouldn't go together. But that's okay. That's their choice, right? But I would do the hard modification when I would say, let's stretch your tank, right? Because it'll make your whole bike look longer. They'd be like, what? Then I have to paint it. I'm like, yeah, but I have a guy that can match it. We're going to be okay, right? So you would take the scary parts and that's what you do for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still wasn't into raking frames. I would still go to Donny Smith to get my frame raked. I do to this day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he and Rob are such an important and integral part of my life that even when I build bikes for the Friends Throwdown every year,
Mm-hmm.
I instantly call Rob and Donny. Can you do another one? Can we get this knocked out?
Yeah.
Why, Brian? You can do that yourself. I said, I don't want to do it myself. I enjoy standing on the podium with a bunch of people and celebrating.
Heck yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
You know what's not fun? Standing on the podium by yourself.
Right.
Taking
I
all the
believe-
credit. Right.
Yeah, I believe that the good Lord designed us to live in community. And so he had 12 disciples. I mean, we just went through Easter, right? He had 12 disciples. The last thing he did before he went to that cross was he said, love one another.
Mm-hmm.
It couldn't be any harder.
Yeah.
I'm not going to love that guy. He just cut me off in traffic. That guy left with my wife. I'm not going to love him.
Mm-hmm.
That guy did this to me. That guy did this to me. That girl did this to me. I'm not going to love them.
Right.
That's not what I'm asking you. I didn't ask you if you liked the way they looked, the way they sounded, or the way they treated you. I asked you to love them anyways.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
How hard is that, man?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I get to work with guys that have been around me and done the things, like I take the chance, right?
Yeah.
And I always remind my team, there's great bands like the Rolling Stones, right? The Rolling Stones wrote hit after hit after hit. And there's one-hit wonders. The one-hit wonders, the guy who was the lead singer in the band wanted to be all that and be everything. And he didn't care about the drummer. He didn't care about the guitarist. He didn't care about the other guys.
Mm-hmm.
And yet maybe they could sing too, right?
Yeah.
If you want to celebrate on the podium and you want to live in community, then act in community. Bring
Mhm.
people with you. Don't make it about you. Make it about someone else. You'll get it back tenfold. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Before you got to the podium in the early days of Clockworks, who was around back then? What were those early days like, and what challenges did you face early on?
It was us working in John Patton's single car garage, right? Suddenly a guy comes in and now he wants to spend $4,000. I'm like, okay, well, for $4,000, we can buy Nest wheels, we can do this, we can do that, right? And people were noticing because every time these guys would take their bikes to a bike night, every time they take them to Sioux Falls to Hot Harley nights at J&L, they were getting attention, right? And these guys were excited about what was happening, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I was still robbing Peter to pay Paul. You bring me $4,000 to build your bike, and I still have to pay the rent. I still have to pay
Yep.
whoever's helping me. And so now I've used up all that money, and now I go to the next build and the next build, making financial decisions that were just terrible.
Yeah.
I was, when John got cancer, we moved into a single stall garage, which you can see right out the window back here, behind the hair salon.
Hmm.
Now they've connected it to the hair salon, and it's where you get your nails done. But that time, Wayne Vickers was building sprint car hoods for outlaw cars, for sprint cars, right?
Mhm.
In that garage. He needed a bigger facility, so he moved out by the airport, and him and his wife were willing to rent me that for a couple $100 a month. It was super cheap, right?
Nice. Yeah.
And we're in there, and no sign on the door. Nobody knew who we were, but suddenly Hot Bike shoots an FXR chopper that I did.
Mm.
I didn't want it shot. I told my guys, don't let them do anything with the magazines.
Why?
And they got it.
Right.
What's that?
Why didn't you want any pictures of it?
Because what if I couldn't build another one?
Uh,
It still
So you
goes back
still
to
had that doubt, right?
It took me 2 years to do that other one, right? And so it took me a long time to do this one, right? And so I went riding with Danny Gray and Dave Perowitz, and we were headed over to Devil's Tower, and my guys got caught at the little hotel room we had in Spearfish, and we were sleeping, 5 of us in a little tiny room, and we were with one of Danny Gray's helpers. Tony was staying with us, and they saw that bike, and Howard Kelly shot that FXR by the Burger King parking lot, and I'm like, no way. I can't believe you guys did that. This is going to kill us. Sure enough, some guy from New Jersey calls and he goes, hi, my name's Mark. I was wondering if you could build me one of those FXR frames that you built. I saw that yellow bike in Hot Bike, and I'm like, I can't, sir. I can't do that. We got lucky to do that one, and it's just not what I do, right? That year on the way to Sturgis, people were asking, I know Clockworks is in Mitchell, South Dakota. Well, how do I find these guys, right? Well, there was no sign on the door. Most people didn't even know who we were, right? But then suddenly one of those guys finds me, and it's Tom Motzko from Drag Specialties.
Motzko, wow. Okay.
And Tom says, there's a custom chrome rug, right? A floor mat right inside the door. And he goes, how come you're not buying from us? I said, well, Scott Studer gave me my start at the Yamaha dealership, and he has the drag dealership. He goes, well, we can have more than one drag dealership in this town. You should probably sign up. So I signed up to sell parts with drag, and I had already been using custom chrome and getting the other stuff wherever I could, maybe from Scott. And so I was off and running, and next thing you know, I was at a real shop, right? Still no sign on the door. I could only use one car parking space. So I'd roll 20 bikes out, put 20 bikes in that one car space. And then my customers had to park out on the street. Well, even in the wintertime, I had to do the same thing because I couldn't get the lifts away from the wall. So I'd roll the bikes out, pull the lifts away from the wall, and I only had 2 lifts in there. And then when we bring the bikes back in, there was only 3 of us. It was me, Dan Cheeseman, and Chris Weber. We literally took an air hose and blew the snow off the bikes and back in, right?
Jeez.
It's just all we had, right? It was just, we went for it, right? And we were just, we'd be the guys who would drive all night to get down to Shreveport, Louisiana, or wherever, Church Point, Louisiana is where we met up with Dave Perowitz and Billy Lane on the biker build-off that year.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I brought down a Sportster chopper, and I knew Mike Guidry, who was a fellow Hamster, and we were all meeting at his house, and he was having this big party, and Mike knew I was broke, and he's like, Brian, you're staying in the garage. There's a suite above the garage. There's a bathroom up there, and it's a nice place, and plenty of place for you and your boys to all crash, so you just go up there.
Yes.
Well, there's 4 of us, and we went up there, and we hung out, and then next thing you know, there's crawdads and Cajun music, and a truck pulled up with all these taps outside for beer, and Billy's still not there. So when Billy finally shows up with his bike, the next morning we're going to ride. Well, they had to do the Discovery helicopter thing and all this stuff. And I had jumped in with Donny Smith and Dan Roche and a bunch of guys, and we just rode ahead, right? And I'll never forget Donnie looking at me and goes, man, that little Sportster run's pretty solid. I said, what do you mean? He goes, we were going 95, that whole way. And I said, I didn't know. I don't have a speedometer. I just was trying to keep up, right? Well, I had the regulator wired wrong, so I cooked the battery in it.
Oh
So
shit.
next thing you
No.
know, we had to get a battery from the head of the Banditos in the area, and Billy Lane and all his guys came pulling in there. And I told my guys, we can't catch up with the Hamsters right now. Let's just stand down and we'll help these guys, and then we'll just ride out behind them, and we'll still get to Dallas in plenty of time to get to Rick Fairless's, right?
Hmm.
I got in so much trouble because a bunch of the Hamsters felt like I was taking Billy Lane's side on this deal and not Dave Perowitz's for the vote. And I'm like, no, I'm just being a motorcyclist. Like, you're supposed to help the other guy, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Donny questioned me on it. I told him what was going on. He explained it to everybody, and still everybody was talking crap, right? Because we were getting in the magazines, we were getting popular, and there's going to be haters, no matter what,
right.
right? And so I learned a lot of lessons through my motorcycle trials and tribulations, if you will, right?
Brian, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
How did that big break come for you for the Discovery Channel Biker Build Off in '06? How did that all arise?
Well, so in '04, they asked me if I wanted to be part of the Discovery Channel Biker Build Off, and I said no. And Hugh King's like, "Are you kidding me? You're really turning down the opportunity to be on TV?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's easy for me. I've turned down a ton of magazine features. I don't want, He goes, "Why would you do that?" I go, "First of all, sir, I work out of a 700 square foot single car garage in Mitchell, South Dakota. You can't even turn your camera around in here. Okay. The other thing is, what if you're filming the one kid who does welding and not the other kid who works on the motors?
Mm.
You're going to break up my band.
Mm.
I'm not interested, but thank you for the honor."
Man.
Crazy.
And I went, maybe I just screwed up, right? I don't know, but whatever. I was scared and I'm not going to do it, right?
Mm.
Fear is the only thing that ever controls humans, right?
Right.
And so I had a fear. I've been talking about that this whole time. The next year I'm out. It's '05. I believe it was Matt Hotch versus Rick Fairless, and they ended in Phoenix somewhere. My mom lived in Phoenix at that time. Her and my dad had gotten a divorce, and I was there visiting my mom. And I went over to the thing, and Hugh King walks up and he looks at me and he goes, "We still have our eye on you, sir.
Hmm.
You're going to be on this show one day." I said, "Yeah, well, we'll see."
Is that a threat?
And so in '06, the next year, he called me. And the guys, we had just moved into this building that we're currently in. It's a lot bigger building. The guys come out. They're like, I was working on a car trailer fixing some wiring. And they're like, "Brian, Hugh King's on the phone. Like, you got to get in here right now." I went in there and he said, "Hey, Brian, we want you to be on the show." And I said, "Well, I'll consider it, but let me talk to my team and then I'll let you know tomorrow." He goes, "Will you really call me back?" I said, "I will call you back." Right. I went in, there was 5 of us. And I said, "Okay, if we're going to do this, we have to keep the band together. What would we build?" We couldn't even agree on what we were going to build.
Mm.
I would build a bobber. I'd build a Sportster chopper. I'd build this. I'd build that. And I said, I wanted to build a bagger. Being in South Dakota,
Crazy.
all my dad's friends were riding baggers. I built some of the coolest baggers,
Mm.
and people were starting to send us their fenders because they'd see them in magazines. So we'd take their back fender, we'd stretch it, or we'd French in a plate frame or whatever. They'd have their local guy paint it, put it together, and now they had a cool bagger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we're not putting on the floorboards, the handlebars, the windshields, the trim, the whatever, right? We were stretching fenders. We were doing the hard work, okay? I told him, I said, "You know what? I can't even stand this arguing." I said, "Forget it. Let's just call it a day. It's 3:00. Everybody just go home. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Come back tomorrow. If we can't make a decision, I'll call him back and we'll just politely bow out." Came in the morning and everybody said, "Well, I thought about it and you're right. We are building a lot of fenders for these baggers. We kind of got that little spreadsheet, kind of this whiteboard thing going on. This guy's from Minnesota. This guy's from Wisconsin. This guy's from Florida. Here's what color his is, and here's what we got to do to his, You might be right, Brian. We've been working on a few parts. We had 20 something parts maybe that we were trying to do ourselves. None of them completed. And I said, "Well, I really think that's what we got to do." And this one kid said, "You know what, Brian, if we do that, if we build a bagger, we're going to lose." I said, you know what? We're probably going to lose. You're right. But I'm okay with losing in front of 4 million people for the first time in my life. 3 to 4 million people are going to watch this show, and I'm going to be the loser. And it's okay to be second. Because when you talk about Super Bowls, it was this team versus that team.
Right.
You know both teams.
Yep.
One of them just had to lose.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
It's competition. It's how it works. You can't always win. It's okay, guys. Well, I'm telling you, I said, okay, then, so you're in or you're out? He goes, I'm in. So I called him back, said we would do it, but I did not tell them we were building a bagger. Okay.
He did it. So they're expecting a hot rod chopper or something, right?
Yeah, they're expecting me to build anything that I built in the magazines, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The producer, it was a young lady, walks in for our segment, and she said, what are you building? I said, I'm building a bagger. She goes, oh, no, you're not. I said, no, I really am. And she goes, no, you're not. I said, then you can pack up your cameras and you can leave because you're not paying me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
You need me to be the lions, the tigers, and the bears for your circus. So go ahead, get out. We weren't off to a good start. She walked outside. She called Hugh King, and he was bummed out. And he said, well, just so they know, they're going to lose, right? Because Jay Hart's going to build a cool little bobber, and he's going to beat him, right? I'm like, it's okay. Then the next thing was, she said, okay, here's the deal. It's going to be you versus Jay Hart. You got to, trash talk him. He's going to trash talk you. We got to create some controversy. This is how it's going to work.
Uh-huh.
This is how this whole deal goes down. And I said, well, not really. I said, because I build my bikes with a team. And this is my team of people I've selected, and they're all here. And we're going to get on these 10 bikes, and we're going to go out there, and we're going to ride up. 5 of them are full-time employees. 5 of the guys are here just to help with the build-off. And we're going to pull up, and you're going to film every one of them as we walk in the door.
That's awesome, man.
Awesome, dude.
Let's go, Brian. Heck yeah.
And then they said, no, we're not. I said, again, I've asked you once. You can do it again. You can leave right now. She goes, they're just going to cut it anyway, Brian. And I said, yeah, but they don't have a chance to cut it if you don't film it.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
She's like, I'm sick of arguing with you. Pull up on your bikes. Guys, film what they're doing. Brian, we're going to cut it. I said, it's fine. We pulled up on our bikes. We all walked in. You can go watch the season 3, episode 10 or 11, whatever it is. Brian Klock versus Jay Hart, and you'll see it happen. As the show goes on, Jay's like pounding his chest early on. I do this, I do that, I weld, I do all these things. Well, yes and no, right? And all of a sudden in the middle of it, he's sitting there with a beer in his chair, and he's frustrated, and he thinks he's not going to make it. It was so bad that Discovery people called me and said, will you call Jay and tell him what you're building? I said, I absolutely will. I called Jay and I said, Jay, don't worry about it. You got this in the bag. I'm fixing to lose. He goes, what do you mean, Brian? I said, I'm building a bagger and I'm going down. It's okay. I'm doing it my way. He got the courage up. He called some guys in, and if you'll see at the end of the show, he brings all these people in. They're all helping him finish his bike. We go on the ride, and even then, Hugh King comes into Alliance, Nebraska, into Carhenge, and we're in the middle of Carhenge, and he says, I really wish you would have built something cooler. I said, it's okay. It's okay. We got done, and he said, Jay's going to load up his bike. We're going to head to where we unload for the helicopter shoot. And I said, I thought the deal was we had to ride these things 1,000 miles.
That's right.
He goes, well, we're not going to waste the money on the helicopters if something breaks. I said, well, I don't give a damn what you're doing. I rode my bike out here, and I'm going to ride my bike to breakfast, and I'm going to ride it to the helicopter. I rode it here from Mitchell, South Dakota. I'm riding my bike.
Mm-hmm.
So I rode to breakfast, and these old farm boys were there in Alliance, Nebraska, and they come out and they're like, man, look at this thing. Look at these wheelie bars. Look at this. How cool is this? And I turned it on. I put on the DVD player, and it was just, over the top TV shit, right? And
it was so ahead of its time, man.
Yeah, but I mean, nobody knew, right?
That's right.
And that's why now to this, day, like my business card says, president and visionary, right? Because sometimes I do call the trends. Sometimes I do lead the way. Sometimes I'm way ahead of myself. Sometimes I make parts that we end up trashing because they never caught on. Or
Yeah.
maybe we just have to bring them back because they didn't catch on. We're doing some of that kind of stuff right now with parts that I designed 15 years ago.
I think you are so ahead of the curve, in my opinion. I've been following this journey a long time, and in this industry, and you're the godfather of the baggers. I think that when everybody was doing this almost similar thing, I believe in
So
that,
for you
man.
having
I
never
w-
been in my shop, there is a magazine. It was called Big Twin back in the day, and it says the godfather of custom baggers is no one trick pony.
oh, no shit,
And
huh?
yeah, and so it's
We
funny
had
because
we
I
had
was like,
Yaffe on the show. We had Yaffe on the show, and I told him the same thing because he was kind of talking about, like, he was one of the first to come out with the big wheel and things of that
yep.
nature. And I said to him, I said, I think I would call Brian Klock the godfather of the bagger initially, when everybody was still doing the same thing during the build off. And he said, yeah, I think I would agree with that.
Well, and Paul's a good friend of mine, and I'm fortunate to call Paul and Billy Lane and Jesse James and some of the our era legends, whatever you want to call it,
Sure.
whether it's Billy Goldhammer or Bill Goldhammer or any of those guys. It's like they're the guys, right? It's like so
So we're
For
leaving out an
sure.
important detail about
okay.
this build. Um, what about the salt flats? So you didn't just build this for show. Tell us, go into that a little bit and what you were able to accomplish and what it meant to
The
you.
world's fastest Indian. That movie came out at that time. Okay.
Yeah.
We all thought, man, wouldn't that be cool if you could ever take something to Bonneville? And one of my friends was helping to promote the world's fastest Indian, all that kind of stuff, right? And oh man, okay, I got to pause for a second. I just goofed up. I said Billy Lane, Paul Yaffe, Jesse James, and I meant Roger Goldhammer. I
Roger
said Bill.
Goodman.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Bill's the local guy, but Roger Goldhammer's the king. Roger
Yeah. Yeah.
Goldhammer, hands down, trumped everybody in the AMD Biker Build-Offs World Championships, and still is the reigning champ as far as I'm
The
concerned.
Canadian master, man. He's
Yep, he
incredible.
is the best. And so fast forward to Bonneville, and as we're talking about that, we won the biker build off. Unbeknownst to me, everybody wanted to see something cool from Custom Baggers. The next day, people were like, "I voted for you. I voted for you." Finally, somebody took geezer glides and made them cool, or whatever the case was. Right? They were super jacked, right? But we put the biggest motor we could into that bagger and just tried to turn it into a hot rod. You can't see inside a motor. So that's why you run wheelie bars, right? It's just marketing. It's like saying, "Hi, this bike's really fast," right? Well,
Hmm.
the
Yep.
wheelie bar idea came from my good friend Brian Karelic, who's also a fellow hamster who lives in Ohio, but he had wheelie bars on his FXR. And I thought, man, that is the coolest street drag looking thing I've ever seen.
That's right.
We worked on all those parts. Tom Motzko led me to the trough, and I provided 35 parts for Drag Specialties. They picked them up. And so the week after the biker build off, we're in Wisconsin for the NVP, their big dealer show, right? Where I rolled that bagger into the whatever you want to call it, the meeting hall, right?
Hmm.
Like, what are you doing? And I said, well, the janitor let me in and he let me go down the hallway and I was able to get my bike in here. And they're like, what do you mean? I go, this is my PowerPoint. I don't do PowerPoints. This is my bike. And so I explained to them how the fenders worked, how the dash worked, how we were going to go for this thing, and how I really was excited to have Drag Specialties on my team. We rolled that bike out of there. We hauled home, and right away we got to tearing it apart. We changed the air ride out to, Race Tech springs in the front and different shocks in the back and Works Performance shocks. And we were just trying to balance it all out. We put it on the scales. My ex-wife Laura was the pilot because I was in the magazines. I was in everything. And I said, women in motorcycling is becoming a big thing.
Hmm.
That's
You
right.
should do this. If you want to do it, you should be the pilot, right? She got on the bike. We weighed it all out. We tried to figure everything out. We double rope bearing the swing arm. We adjusted the neck bearings. We thought we had this thing down because everybody knows that baggers wobble and there's an inherent high speed wobble, right? Sure enough, we get out to the salt flats and having never been there before, we had everything we could do to get that bike to run. Um, just to operate properly. Some of the older boys came by and told me, put in a little hotter plug, kid, here's what you got to do. And I'm like, okay, perfect. So we're already learning. And
Yep.
Laura goes out and runs that bike, and at 125, it goes into the wobble, right?
Yeah.
She let go, let it wobble, let it settle down, and then got back in it. Okay.
Jeez.
She goes through the traps at 140 some miles an hour. By the time we were done, it was like 143.67 or something. She would know the exact decimal points. But we had now just done 2 passes and become the world's fastest bagger.
Wow.
Jeez.
On the dash of that bike, I had already painted WFB, okay? Because it was the way fast bagger is what I was calling the bike, right?
Mhm.
Way fast
And
bagger.
we had a little WFB and then had the little cartoon of it with a wheelie bar on there, right? Well, then it became the world famous bagger because it now won the biker build off. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
That was
suddenly
so awesome, by the
2
way.
weeks later,
I was pulling for you, man.
2 weeks later, it's the world's fastest bagger. I mean, you couldn't write a Cinderella story
No doubt, man.
in August of 2006 that was bigger and better in 4 weeks than what had just happened to us, right?
So
Mhm.
amazing.
Fred Fox, the man who made Drake Specialties what it is today, walked up with Tom Monsko and he said, "Wow, do you have any idea what you've done, son?" I said, "I don't, sir." And he goes, "Be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for." He said, "You just made those bikes cool for everyone in the world."
That's right.
And I had no idea what he's really talking about. But then suddenly we're on the cover of Parts Magazine, Drag Magazine. We're on the cover of this magazine. We're on the cover of that magazine. And, people from Freeway Magazine in France are calling, and Charlie Lacoste and these
Wow.
guys. And I'm like, how's this even happening? Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm from a town of 350 people. There's 14 kids in my class.
It's crazy.
God just had such a big plan for who I was supposed to be, but I was never going to be as famous as Jesse James or Billy Lane or any of those guys, right? But I was steadfastly just taking my steps, right? And knowing that maybe I would get there, maybe I wouldn't get there, but you know what? I get to get up every day and I love playing motorcycles.
Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Well, going back to what you just said, never going to be this and never going to be that. That only goes into the eyes of the beholder. In my opinion, I mean, look, and it's not to, to butter anybody's toast or anything.
No, but
the visionary of what you did, of taking that ballsy chance when everybody's telling you no, what are you crazy, a bagger, that's for old people, that's for this, that's for that, and you said it's my way or the highway, where most people would have just said, you know what, this is a good way for me to promote myself, it's a good way to build the business, and you just stood true to what you did, man, and you've absolutely redesigned the whole freaking industry in regards to, like you said, making the baggers cool again. And now look at it. I mean, it's insanity now.
Yeah. So on the
Mhm.
way home, I thought, man, I walked into Carly and Erica's life, and Carly was 8 and no, Carly was 11 and Erica was almost 14. Right. And so they had moved here from Wisconsin with their mom, and their mom had put everything she had into this business. She maxed out her credit cards. I maxed out my credit cards. We were just a train wreck waiting to happen. Right. But we were trying to grow this thing. Okay. So I put my hand out the window and I thought, the front of that bike has this angle where the headlights come out, right? And it just seems like it's pushing up, right? So if you go like this and you've played that game and you put your hand down, well, this is your hand ever so slightly curved. And if you just tip it a little bit, it pushes down nice and easy, okay? Well, that's the hip on a windshield. So let's try to kick the air up over the rider and then down on the outside edges and see if we can't make this thing more stable,
The
right?
flare.
And I knew nothing about windshields. I just knew how to hold my hand out the window like every kid, right?
Yep.
And we had done a bunch of rapid prototype parts on that bike early on. That wasn't a thing in 2006. We were way ahead of the curve. Stratasys had a machine that cost $250,000, and I couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
But they brought it down. They let me use it, and then sure enough, Discovery Channel, of all the things they cut that out.
Mm.
the technology that made that bike what it was, it ran 15 different plastic rapid prototype printed parts at 140
Right.
miles an hour on the salt flats.
Right.
So we built that windshield in 3 pieces. We glued it together. We figured it out. We knew what it would feel like. And we had 15 people or whatever it was, 10 people at that time. We went out, everybody rode it. I said, don't tell anybody what you think until we all get back. That's now become what we do every time.
Yep.
We go out and ride all the bikes all morning, test all the windshields, and then we'll go eat pizza or something. I'm like, okay, what are you thinking? Well, that first day, somebody goes, I rode that whole way with my hat on. We now always ride with helmets, but at that time we didn't. We were young and dumb and going for it. He's like, I rode the whole way with my hat on and it didn't blow off. That thing really works. How are we going to prove that to people? I said, well, we'd have to get in a wind tunnel, and that costs $8,000 to $10,000 for one day. I can't afford that,
Yeah.
Well, next thing you know, we meet a guy in Myrtle Beach. He's talking to my wife and says, what was that like riding that bike that first time? And she goes, well, it wobbles, and I let go and then let it calm down. And then I got back in it. But, Brian has this windshield thing that really kind of holds it down now. It's so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, you should talk to one of my friends who's into NASCAR trucks. They called the guy. He was kind of cold and said, if you're ever in Mooresville, North Carolina, why don't you give me a call? Well, we went from right there to Mooresville, North Carolina, went to the guy's shop. He's like, I really like your story. We're going to go to the wind tunnel. I said, sir, I don't have any money for this wind tunnel. He goes, no, we're going to the wind tunnel.
Nice. Heck yeah.
We go to the wind tunnel. We're getting a tour, and I kept interrupting the guy who was giving us a tour. And I said, sir, I really appreciate your time, but I don't want you to burn up your whole day. I don't have any money for this.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, he goes, you need to be quiet. We're going to make sure she's safe. And I will show you something at the end. At the end of the tour, his partner came over from the real wind tunnel next door, A1. This is A2. At A1, this is where they do all the NASCAR testing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Every day except for maybe Thanksgiving and Christmas, right?
Wow.
He walks in and he goes, hey, I understand you're a little concerned about money. I said, I am, sir. And he goes, let me show you something. He opens a door, flips a light on, and he said, what do you see in there? I said, there's a bunch of motorcycles. He goes, yeah, those are my employees. We're motorcycle people. We're going to make sure that there's a way you can do this. So before I got home, he had sent me an email with a payment plan. So I could pay over the next 6 months and eventually come in and do my day in the wind tunnel. Okay.
Nice. Like your dad.
Yep. He was saving the day.
That's amazing.
But on the way home, it gets worse. My credit card didn't work.
Mm.
And I didn't have any money left.
Mm.
I wasn't going to be able to get back to South Dakota. I'd put everything I had into building this bike for this build off. I put everything I had into going for it. And I finally lost.
Yeah.
I called Click Baldwin, who was the Harley dealer in Gastonia, North Carolina. And they couldn't find him in the shop, and he wouldn't answer the phone. And I'm in a panic. And I called again. The guy goes, Brian, he's still not back. I said, you got to get a hold of him for me. He goes, well, I think he's going to watch the shuttle launch tomorrow with Maury. They're riding their bikes down to Cape Canaveral. So he's probably home getting ready. I'll try to call him. Click calls me and he goes, Brian, what's going on? I said, Click, I'm in trouble. I'm out of money. And he goes, how far are you away? I said, I'm about 100 miles north. He goes, do you have enough fuel to make it this 100 miles? I said, I do, but I was going to go up to South Dakota versus down to Gastonia.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, please just come see me, son. So I went down to Gastonia. We pulled in, and he said, what's going on? I just said, well, I have 5 fenders in the trailer, and I'd like to sell you those fenders for $100 a piece. They normally sell for $250 to $350, but I'll sell them to you for $100. I just need $500 so I can get home. He goes, I don't want your money. You continue to show these to dealers on the way home. Here's the $500. Okay.
Man.
Now let's go. I want to show you my shop. His shop was a converted Kmart.
Huh.
It was huge. You could drive your motorcycle straight through it, right?
Wow.
Jeez.
And so as we're walking around there before we went to dinner that night, we stayed at his house. His wife wasn't home. He's like, there's no sheets on the bed. I put the sheets there. You're going to have to put them on yourself. she'll be embarrassed that I even let you see it without being all made up, right? He goes, but Brian, you got to promise me one thing. I said, what's that, Click? He said that you won't quit.
Mm.
He said, this industry needs more good guys like you. You got to promise me you're not going to quit, son. I said, I
Wow.
won't quit. And he goes, all right, let's go eat dinner. We
Wow.
ate dinner. I left there with that $500. The next morning I went to the fuel station. I thought, what if I swipe my card? What if it works today?
Mm-hmm.
One time is one more fuel savings that I put in my pocket and I save till I get home,
That's
even
right.
though I'm racking up interest and I'm completely broke, right?
Mm-hmm.
It worked. By the grace of God, it worked all the way home.
Wow.
I got home, I put that $500 in an envelope, wrote Click a nice letter, and I sent it to him. Sometimes people believe in you more than you need to believe in yourself. Click Baldwin was my hit mayor. He was the guy who believed in me like he believed in my dad, right?
Right.
Click Baldwin had, prior to that, we were at like a Chinese restaurant or something, right? Click come by and said hi to everybody. It was in Myrtle Beach or something. I had my team there and there was maybe 4 or 5 of us, right? We were getting ready to get the check and the lady says, oh, wait, I got to bring out dessert. I said, no, we don't order dessert, right? She goes, well, there's a gentleman who ordered dessert for you and said you should just relax and enjoy it.
Hmm.
I said, the guy with the little glasses. She goes, I can't say that, sir. I said, it was. She smiled at me and walked away. It was Click Baldwin. Click Baldwin bought dessert.
No way.
That's crazy.
Yeah. This is before he gave me the $500, right?
Yeah.
So he was
Yep.
already telling me and stepping into my life in God's perfect plan, just letting me know that I care about you and your team and I like what you're doing and I think you got this, So many people have done that for me over the years and, so many people have written 2 pages or a whole chapter or 10 chapters in the Clockworks book, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely, man.
Fast forward to that windshield becoming the #1 selling part in America. I needed $300,000 worth of inventory and I didn't have anything. I had nothing, right? I went to the bank and, they would like to loan you money for a farm, tractors, or cows.
Right.
But not so much for
motorcycle
plastic,
part.
not
Yeah.
plastic.
Right.
They didn't understand it. They didn't believe in me. They kept giving me these Band-Aid loans. Those Band-Aid loans kept building up and building up. I tried to get them consolidated into one loan. They fired me from the bank because, unbeknownst to me, the bank was already in trouble.
Yep.
I had to go to another bank. They totally handcuffed me. But it was for my better good, right? I
Yeah.
sucked at money. I always sucked at money. I've always sucked at money. Okay. Fast forward to 2016, Laura and I get a divorce. And, I'm reading books about communication and love languages and all these things because I know we just didn't communicate.
Mhm.
Right.
We just didn't express in our hearts without being mad at the other person or looking down on the other person what was wrong, what was truly wrong, or what we truly were feeling, right?
Mm.
And so my buddies are all like, what are you doing? Like, you're already divorced, dude. I said, yeah, I know, but you only have 2 choices in a divorce. You can be bitter or you can be better.
Mm.
I'm going for better.
Love it.
It doesn't have to happen to the next person. Well, that next person is Vanessa. And Vanessa and I met prior. She was working for a company called British Customs that did a bunch of stuff for Triumph. We were doing a lot of work with Triumph in 12 and 13 when Greg Heichelbeck had moved over from Harley Davidson to Triumph.
Mhm.
And so we had built Triumph baggers and all kinds of stuff for them to promote. And they were really catching quite a head of steam at that point. And we were working with the folks in England. It was great. I hadn't seen Vanessa for probably 5 years at that point. And one of my buddies called and said, hey, you're not going to believe who I'm going to dinner with tonight. I said, oh, who's that? He goes, Vanessa. I said, from British Customs? He goes, yeah, she doesn't work for British Customs anymore. She works for a real estate company out of Beverly Hills called LA Realty. She's an accountant. I said, oh, okay. He goes, well, we'll probably talk about old times and, how much fun we had all working with Triumph. And, you're probably going to come up. You okay if I talk about your divorce? I said, yeah, I've been divorced, now for 6 months or better. It's been a year. We've been apart and it's okay. You do what you got to do. And Vanessa texted me and said, I'm so sorry to hear about that. I thought you guys were the first family of motorcycling. Your daughter's setting land speed records, Laura. I really looked up to you guys. I'm really sorry it didn't work out. I said,
Wow.
yeah, me too. It's a long story. We can talk sometime. Well, fast forward about a month, we get on the phone and we're talking for 3 hours. Like I'm
Wow.
doing laundry, she's doing her accounting, all the things happening, but we just going through all the stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Next thing you know, I'm out there visiting my cousin Mike, and I'm in Orange County. And she goes, "Where are you at in Orange County?" I said, "I'm in Costa Mesa." She goes, "That's where I live. That's where my daughter's at. I live in Redondo Beach, but my daughter's in Costa Mesa. I come get her on Wednesday nights, you know." And so we went out for dinner with her and her friends,
Mm.
and we just started talking. I said, "I've just had the best time while I was here, riding motorcycle with Mike, hanging out with you and your friends. This has been a treat." I said, "One day I will date someone like you. You're very smart. You're very challenging. You're very blunt. I love it." Right?
Mm-hmm.
She goes, "What about me?" I said, "Well, you're 20 years younger than me. Like, I can't do that, you know?"
Hmm.
And she just insisted. And I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll date you from South Dakota. But the minute you're ready to find Mr. Right out here in California, and there's lots of them, right?
Mm.
I'm out. I understand. Like, you don't need me, right?"
Hmm.
Well, next thing you know, she comes out to an Eric Church concert. And I got some tickets from my friends at Jack Daniels. And we went there. We were backstage. We were having a shot with Eric's crew and all the things. And we just went out there and we danced and partied through the whole concert, right? And just had the best time. Well, the
Right.
next morning she wakes up at the house and she walks out onto the deck and there's little footprints in the frost. So what are you doing out here? It's January. You get inside, you know. And she goes, "This is beautiful. I'm
Mm.
going to live here one day." I said, "I don't think you understand." She goes, "No, I don't think you understand. I've lived where it's 75 and sunny my whole life, and I want to live where there's four seasons. I want to see this stuff."
Yeah.
Right? Again, how would I ordain that or how would I plan that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she came here and literally dug us out of a hole that we were in, you know, $500,000 in debt, you know, that I owed the bank. And we just kept cranking. She called all my vendors and said, "I know what's going on, but here's what we're going to do. You're not going to get paid for 60 days. And they're like, "No way." And now, you know, we're doing millions of dollars with those same vendors and they couldn't be happier. I mean,
Hmm.
she runs a tight ship and she literally dug us out of that whole process, right?
That's
And
amazing.
brought with her eventually, you know, we traveled back and forth to California for 4 years, every 2 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when she would get to see her daughter. So that little girl at that time was, you know, 10, right? So back and forth for all those years. And when she's finally 14, the judge says she needs to move to South Dakota and get involved in school there as quickly as possible. So Ashlyn comes, lives with us, gets her driver's license. She's 15 now, has her own Jeep. She's an A student. She just
Nice.
booked a missions trip to Uganda.
Nice.
She went to Costa Rica and Spain last year by herself.
Wow.
It's truly an amazing kid.
Yeah.
And then we have Cargo, who is 4. I never had a biological child, and Vanessa said she wanted a kid, and I'm like, no way. I actually called Kyle Petty, NASCAR driver. His wife is 25 years younger than him. And I said, "What are
Okay.
you doing? You
Gosh.
have a whole second family." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm actually on my second child, which now he has 3 with Morgan." And he goes, "Don't even think about it, Brian. Just jump in." He goes, "You're not
Good.
struggling for financial wealth. You're established. You know what you're doing. You'll enjoy that little life and how you feed into it and how you can teach them things so much more, right?"
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And it has slowed me down at night. It has changed my life. Clockworks continues to flourish. You know, we had a flood in 2019, and
Yeah.
like going to your own funeral. People
Yeah,
say,
man.
"Well, if you like Clockworks, then you should buy Clockworks." So what should have been the most tumultuous, terrible year, and it was $1 million loss in the flood.
Wow.
Insurance didn't cover it.
Man.
Doubled our sales that year. We doubled our sales.
Jeez. That's
How's that happen?
Insurance didn't cover it?
Not a cent.
That's bullshit.
Yep. And I told them for 10 years this could possibly happen. They said, "You're covered, you're covered." Suddenly I wasn't covered, right? So I went in and I told my team that day, I said, "You know what? God's got a different plan." And they said, "What do you mean by that, Brian?" I said, He wants me to clean this place up and prepare for the next 20 years.
That's right.
Man.
That's right.
So if you don't like your desk, you don't like your file cabinet, you don't like any of those parts that are wrecked, just throw them away. If
Yeah.
we don't have the
Dang.
money to start over. I say, yeah, but that's what he wants us to do is start over, right?
Man.
Danny Dixon from Dixon Flannel Shirts, right?
Yep.
I had met him and we created a shirt in 2019, which we sold at Sturgis. He fronted the money because I couldn't see myself investing $50,000 in flannel shirts. We sold a ton of those shirts that year, and we just kicked off a great relationship.
Yeah.
Vanessa wrote him a check for $41,000, 30 days after Sturgis. The same time we had that flood. It was September 11th when it flooded. On the 13th, Danny Dixon sends me a video, and he said, "Oh, look at this, a check from Clockworks for $41,000. Isn't that nice?" And he ripped it up.
No
What?
way.
And he said,
No way.
he said, I spent 3 days with your team. One day riding out to Sturgis, one day hanging out with them and being at your pre-Sturgis party. And he said, it's about the people, Brian. You have the most incredible team.
Yeah.
Put that money back into there and make that place better than ever for them. I literally sat at my kitchen table and cried.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
insane.
Wow.
I called him up and he said, don't you dare send me another check. I'm not kidding.
That's amazing.
I put that $41,000. I came in with the video in the morning and showed the team the video of him ripping that check up. And I said, sometimes other people believe in you more than you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Again.
I said, go ahead and go to Menards, go get the insulation, go get the paint, go get all the wood. Let's rebuild this thing and make it better than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Clockworks has been on a trajectory since Danny ripped that check up that I can't even explain.
Man.
There's always a plan. You just don't know what the plan is. And if you're willing to follow it and you're willing to do the work and you're willing to get in there and dig deep. And my team rebuilt this whole shop, right? So over the course of the next 3 years, we just kept rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding things. And suddenly now it's better than it's ever been. Like we couldn't ask for a better spot to be in, you know?
Brian, quick question, man. And this is something that I thought about from the past. I know that was a complete life-changing thing where you rebuilt it for the better. But I'm going to take it back and rewind it just a little bit. All right, you come out with the Flare Windshield. It is the hottest thing since sliced bread. I have one on my Road King. I mean, everybody in my shop, when we would put windshields on, it'd always be the Clockworks windshield. But so you've got this thing going, you're a small business starting to grow, and all of a sudden now you come in and you find out that Harley Davidson has copied you've been building windshields for Harley Davidsons, and now Harley Davidson has copied your style and started selling it with their own product. Can you please take us, I've always been so interested in how that was handled and what you went through.
It was on the cover of Power Sports Business that we sold 18,000 windshields that first year.
Yeah.
Drag predicted we'd sell 500 in the lifetime of a Road Glide. So to sell 18,000 bested their best product, which was the Reinhardt exhaust, which sold 17,000. So we had set a new standard for aftermarket parts. If you sell 5,000 of something in the motorcycle industry, you're absolutely killing it, right? So all that to say, when Harley knocked me off in 2011, I believe it was, we've been selling for 2 or 3 years and doing really well. And my team was growing and the financial side was kind of figuring it out. And Harley came in and it was like Goliath had struck, you know, that was over. The gorilla had spoken.
Right.
It was done. And so I literally told my team in tears that, you know, this had happened and it looks just like ours.
Mm.
I said, what you can do is you can talk good about our windshield. What you can't do is talk anything bad about theirs.
Mm.
Don't mention their windshield. Don't talk bad about their windshield. You've got to take the higher road. You got to do the right thing and sell what you're selling. Don't worry about what they're doing. Arlen Ness told me a long time ago, put your blinders on, Brian, and just do it your way. Okay. And that was about custom bike building. Doesn't matter if that guy painted his bike the same color orange you wanted to use. Would you have used those pegs? Would you have used those exhausts? Would you have done those handlebars? No. Okay, well then let's see the Brian Klock version of it in orange, right?
Nice.
So I said that. I hope they believed it. I was trying to make myself believe it. I went up to my desk and I put my head on my desk and I said, God, I know why you brought me here. Now tell me what to do. And he's like, well, I want you to write a letter. So I wrote a letter to Willie G. Davidson. Willie had believed in me. The first time I ever took my FXR, my custom FXR, was the Central Regional Hog Rally in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
Willie came over, and weird thing, they didn't call off my class. I rode my bike up to the stage to ask the guy what happened and what was wrong with my bike, because I'm going to see you in Sturgis in a month. And fast forward to Willie seeing me ride up there, and he walks up and he goes, is there a problem here? And I said, yeah, I just want to know what's the matter with my bike. The guy put his head down and he goes, I forgot to call off the class. You won Radical Custom. This is the best bike in the show, sir. I'm sorry.
Jeez.
Willie said, I'm really sorry about that, Brian. You missed your moment in the sun because the crowd had all dispersed, but let's go over here by the Harley truck. And he took pictures with me and my friends. And the next day he came out and he said, I think you really have a future in this. And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah. He said, you could do this. I said, well, I hope to one day be one of the gentlemen of our industry like Arlen Ness or Donny Smith. He goes, well, you don't have to be a hamster to be a gentleman. I said, I know that, sir. Those guys just happen to build really cool stuff. And so Arlen believed in me, took that picture. Willie believed in me and gave me those accolades. And that was all within another 60-day window, right?
Right.
Mm.
Again, people believe in you is critical, And
Yep.
so people continue to knock off our windshield. Harley continued to do what they're doing. I had a conversation with Willie after that letter. We agreed to just be gentlemen. We'll do what we do. You do what you do. And we'll just take it from there. And I said, well, that'd be great. That'd be perfect. I'm in. Thank you very much for the respect. Now, I've talked to, people like Ray Dre, who was one of Harley's most acclaimed designers alongside Willie. The engineers, a bunch of them, they're my friends. Like, we've talked, right? Like, it's okay to be creative and to play for your team. But
Mhm.
even the professional football players are friends, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
So Brian, you build parts now for Harley, and I gotta actually read the list because there's so many. But you got Harley, Indian, BMW, Kawasaki, Honda, Yamaha, Can-Am, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How does it feel going from where you were to now having the big players in the game, these big OEMs, contacting you to collaborate on parts from a guy who never gave up on his vision?
It's humbling. I mean, it's going to Sturgis, going to Daytona, going to Laconia is humbling, right? You're shocked that you've had that big of an impact on the motorcycle industry, and why you, right? That's what I always
Yeah.
say to myself, why you, And I think it's because we feed into the lives of people that are here. We feed into the lives of our customers. I don't know. We just want the greater good.
Mm.
So it's not me. I mean, it's,
But you have led the team to do the right thing and to do and have integrity and do it right the first time. And I think that's a big part of it. And I respect you and applaud you for being so humble, but you have led that team in that direction and kept that culture alive at your company. And it's, from an outside perspective, I think it's fantastic to see accolades coming your way to a man who really earns it, who's built a team who all earn it. That's couldn't be
That
happier
you don't
for you,
seek
man.
it, you just earn it. That's the beauty about you. And Brian, you've been in this game a long time now. How do you stay inspired, and you've already built a brand name with Clockworks? I mean, it's a world renowned name in the motorcycle industry. Obviously the drive comes from your upbringing with your dad and your mom and how you were raised and things like that, but what's inspiring you these days to continue pushing forward with that vision thinking that you do?
young guys, young girls, people building bikes. God bless my wife. I mean, Vanessa still lets me play, right? So if
Right.
I want to build an FXR, she's like, well, then buy it. You're not broke, you know?
Right.
I'm like, okay, so I buy this $3,000 FXR and I'm cutting it apart. And that's not where I should be focusing my money. Or my mind. I should be focusing my mind on products, right? But these bikes still inspire me. These bikes still make me giggle, right? So
That's a good way to
that's
put
fun
it.
for me, right? I'm still a motorcycle guy at heart.
Yeah.
I was just in Milan, Italy for the Motorbike Expo, right? I was just in um, Japan for Moon Eyes. First time I've been to
Cool.
Moon Eyes. It was a bucket list item for me, right?
Man.
But I'm going there, and all of a sudden, this Japanese builder or this Italian builder comes up, and they're like, "Hey, aren't you Brian Klock?" I'm like, "Yeah." Can I ask you some questions?
Sweet.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because Arlen Ness and Donny Smith answered all my questions. Donny Smith still answers my questions, you know. Rob Rail still answers my phone calls, you know. It's easy to be inspired or stay inspired because who doesn't love cool motorcycles? Like,
That's
I mean,
right, man.
Yeah.
the young kids down here, like I'm building an old FXR with flamed tins that I bought from a guy in Daytona. I don't know who painted them. I just think it's a cool look, and it's that 90s look, right?
Yeah.
And the tail light has a blue dot in it, right? You could buy a blue dot, and the blue dot could either be plastic or glass. If it was glass, the light would shine through it way better and would give your tail light kind of that purple hue. Highly illegal, super cool. One of the few things you could do as a young guy. You hoped you didn't break your taillight lens as you're drilling it. You would heat your drill bit up so it kind of melt the plastic and drill at the same time, right? And I'm explaining that to these young kids who are 30 years old, and they're like, "No way, that's really a thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, tap on that. You'll realize it's glass." Like, that's so cool, right? Well, because they now know what they didn't know before, and nobody's
Right.
talking about blue dot taillights on Instagram. I mean, that's not even a
Right.
thing. You search it and not find anything, you know?
And that
So
was you, and that was you 20, 30 years ago,
Yeah.
with Donny and Arlen and
Pouring
same
through the
thing.
magazines, going to events, and as a 58-year-old man, I have a duty, I have a diligence to see magazines live on, to see the history of motorcycling live on, to see these kids get inspired, and to show them, you know, here's one of the things I think is the biggest thing I project on these kids is that it's about stance. If the stance of the bike is right, it doesn't matter if it's brown, pink, purple, orange, yellow, it will be cool. Okay.
That's right.
So think of your bike like a line drawing. If you look at it from the exact side, if the lines and the proportions and everything doesn't kind of flow well, then move something.
Yeah.
Move the tank an inch this way or back 2 inches this way. Move the fender around a little bit or this way a little bit. But if it doesn't flow well as a line drawing, it doesn't matter what color it is.
Right.
The line drawing will give it the stance. The stance will give it the look. The look is all there. Now you pick whatever color you want.
That's right.
That it reminds me of doing the maze backwards, which reminds me of the
Yep.
hamsters, which is the next question. You've been with the hamsters since '98. What's been the most enjoyable part of that, of being a part of that?
It's a camaraderie that I can't even understand or explain. If my wife goes on a trip, I'll tell you this way. If my wife goes on a trip and say she's going to drive to California to see her family by herself, she'll ask me if she can take the hamster book. Okay.
Cool.
And that's just a simple little book that has everybody's here. I can show you. It's sitting right here.
Sweet.
Take my post-it note off it.
This is so cool.
It's a simple little
Okay.
book, right?
Yeah.
But in it, it might have your picture and your phone number. Okay.
That's cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And so now she'll take that thing, and if she breaks down in
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
there's two guys in Idaho
Directory.
that can help her out, and they'll drop everything they can do to make sure they help her.
That's awesome.
So many great guys with so many great hearts in this industry that just the thing that threads all these guys together is custom motorcycles. It's all about custom motorcycles. And we love to ride custom motorcycles. We've done incredible things for Lifescape charity, for the Sturgis Motorcycle Museum, you know. But at the end of the day, it's custom motorcycles is the thread that binds guys like Dave Perowitz, Donny Smith, you know, all the originals, right? Jimmy Leahy, all these guys together, Steve Allington and Ed Kerr. I mean, the reason they're all there, Barry Cooney, the reason they're there is because custom motorcycles, right?
That's
So it
right.
doesn't matter if you now live in the Philippines, if you live in Italy, if you live in Florida, or you live in Idaho, custom motorcycles ties every one of us together.
Yep.
That's right. Well, what are you thinking of the new culture now? Being in this industry a long time, seeing the different trends changing consistently. Obviously, now we're in a FXR craze where everybody's building some cool stuff. What's your opinion now of what's happening, and do you like the way the industry is going? Where do you think it's heading to next?
I think the 90s are coming back.
Okay.
I think in the 90s, Softails were the hottest thing since sliced bread, right?
Yep.
And you can buy a Softail, whether it's an Evo Softail or an M8 Softail or a twin cam Softail. It might be $3,000, it might be $6,000, or it may be $10,000, but you can access this platform that gives you something to build on.
Yep.
Then do
Yeah.
it. Just
Yeah,
get
For
one.
sure, man.
Make it cool. Like, you can have your cool bagger and you can have all the stuff, or you can have your touring, lowrider ST or whatever. But go buy a $3,000 Evo Softail and go hunt. Hunt
Yeah,
the
I'm an
park.
Evo guy, man, through and through.
Yeah. So search eBay, search Facebook Marketplace. You can
Yeah,
make it cool. I mean, I
that's
just got
right.
done doing a 94 Dyna that I bought on Marketplace for $800. Now,
Yeah.
granted, I probably got a lot of money in it. But
Hmm.
the fun part for me was hunting down an Arlen Ness cam cover and an Arlen Ness
Yeah.
Nice.
hydraulic cover that matched it. I set up
Nice.
Bub's pipes that
Nice.
ultimately didn't work, but
Right.
I found the old parts and
That's so
I
cool.
worked
The
with
hunt.
3 somethings and we put it together, and it was a treat to work with those
That's
kids
right.
to put this thing together.
Yeah. How many people do you have working for you now?
27, I believe, right now.
Gosh, how gratifying is it knowing that you kept the company that you started, you've stayed persistent, and now you get to help not only your employees, but the people in the community, their families, they get a great job. They've got, just it's a dream job, I would think, for most folks. It's got to be pretty gratifying to be able to build that team, and you being such a team-oriented person. What does that mean to you?
It means everything. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to die with nothing, right? I will leave motorcycles to my kids and this building and all this artwork and all this stuff that my wife will have to sell off or get rid of or keep whatever she wants and get rid of the rest. It doesn't matter, you know? I mean,
Hmm.
if I can get these people to be better humans, if I can help them through hurdles in their life, because we're all going to have hurdles. Nobody's going to get through this thing without a scathed mark or something they did wrong or something that happened. I mean,
Hmm.
one of the guys just got off probation, right?
Yep.
He had a drug problem, right? Good for him, you know. But I
Yeah,
never quit on him because at the end of the day,
that's
God's never going to
incredible.
quit on you. You got to believe in him one time. If,
That's
he created
incredible.
you, in my opinion, he made you. He just wants to have a relationship with you. And like my son Cargo says, God's sitting right there, Daddy. God's sitting right there. I'm like, yeah, no, I know. Because
I'm
I don't have to
sure.
be scared. I said, I
That's too
understand.
cool. Yeah.
So
Brian, you were inducted into the Sturgis Hall of Fame in 2012 for everything you have and currently do for the local community. What did that honor mean to you personally as a small kid growing up in the same state and all this stuff, with these big dreams, and all of a sudden you're kind of in the grail of the Motorcycle Hall of Fame. What did that mean to you personally?
uh, it's an honor. It's an honor, without a doubt. Please don't misunderstand that. But I still don't feel like I deserved it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it was 2012. I've still got a lot of work to do. I've still got a lot to learn about business. I still got a lot to learn about life. I still got a lot of years ahead of me to try to lead these guys and to look out and see Willie G, Mike Corbin, Donny Smith, Arlen Ness. I mean, I literally stood up there, and if you ever see the video from my interview speech, I cried through the whole thing
Yeah,
Mhm.
I've seen it.
because I couldn't help it. I mean, I'm not worthy, right? These are my heroes. I'm looking out at my heroes, and they want me to be one of them. It's a treat.
You are
It
one of
is.
them. You're one of those guys. I'm a person who's been in this industry for 22 years. Um, I've been I have an extreme passion for this. This is why we do these podcasts like this. And you, I don't know, man. There's just something about you, your faith. I guess your faith, your belief, your upbringing, whatever it is, man. It's turned you into an amazing man. So keep that shit up, man. You're an
Well,
incredible
like
guy. So
I wasn't always that guy, and I wouldn't always talked about all this stuff. Um, but now it's like, even before I come on this morning, I mean, I pray this morning before I left the house. I'm like, okay, God, whatever you want to say today, you say it,
cool.
like,
Mm.
so, I mean, I come on here knowing that you're going to ask me some questions and I'm going to tell you some stories. I don't really know what they are. I'll get done with this and I'll have to go back and watch it myself to go, oh, really?
Nah. Yeah, no, man. It pours out of you naturally. So that's the beauty of this thing. We didn't even ask half the questions because you just kind of went on, man. So we were just like, it's
Well,
just nice sitting
hopefully
back and listening.
hopefully we caught some of it. If you guys need to get a hold of me, you're welcome to. If there's comments or questions or you want to ask stuff on the backside, obviously these guys will have a way to get a hold of them, but please ask. I mean, that's what
You
I'm here
got it.
for is, we've all been given gifts and it's only if we don't use them that we fail.
And one more question before we go into the speed round. As you know, our podcast and the other ones that you've been a part of are documenting history of the industry. And after we're gone, we've been following you since 2006, and you're an extremely humble person. You normally pass the praise on. You maintain your positive outlook. What do you hope to leave behind for the industry and, the business world as a father, you name it?
I hope they understand the power of positivity. Number one,
Mhm.
celebrate a win every day. Don't look at the negative. Yeah, we're all going to have negative. Yes, things happen. Yes, you're going to get pissed off. Yes, you're going to lose your cool. Yes, you're going to blow a relationship. It's up to you to fix it. You can handle it. You can do it. Number two, don't let fear control you. Um, between you and God, you got this. You can do it. There's nothing you can't do. And number three is truly that relationships are everything. So whether it's your relationship with your Heavenly Father, whether it's your relationship with somebody on the street, whether it's a relationship with a person sitting next to you on the airplane that you've never met before,
Mhm.
it's still a relationship.
That's
Open
right.
it up, see how you can make their day. Do it for them, not for you. You'll get it back tenfold.
That's awesome, man. That's great advice. All right, buddy. We got the serious and the cool stuff out of the way, your background.
Great.
So that was a dream come true for us because we're big fans, number one. Now
Thank
we'll
you for
have a little
having me.
fun. We'll have a little fun. We'll do a 15 round speed round questions. Whatever answer pops into your head, you spit it out. And if you don't make the 2 minutes, then how about we make a pact that you send us a signed picture of yourself so we can hang it in our podcast area and
Happy to
hang
do
it
it.
proudly that we had you. All right, awesome. All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Ben, put 2 minutes on the clock.
Done.
All right. What's the one tool in your shop that saved your ass more times than you can admit?
A grinder.
Okay, good one. Besides your family, who was the biggest influence in your journey that you still hold a special place in your heart?
John Patton Sr.
Okay. If you could have dinner with anyone, past or present, who would it be?
I would probably have dinner with Donny Smith, Arlen Ness, Abraham Lincoln, and George Washington.
That's a great one. That's nice. All right. That's a good dinner.
Because I think they
That's
come from all different sides of the fence, and I just want to hear their opinions on all of it.
All right. All right. This one I've always wanted to ask you, so I'm so stoked that we got you. Not including you, give me your Mount Rushmore for motorcycle builders.
So it would have to be Arlen Ness for sure, Donnie Smith, and then I would probably put Ron Sims up there, and I would also put, like I would have to say, um, I it's weird for me. It's like it's guys like Little John Butera who went before Jesse James and before some of these other guys, you know? Like, I mean, I don't think of Mount Rushmore as anyone that's in my era per se, right?
I gotcha.
So, you know, there were some incredible chopper builders, you know, from Florida, like Lou, and I can't say his last name, begins with an F. But it just, you know, I get inspired by these people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Bucket list trip still left to ride.
I want to ride in Italy. I really want to ride in Italy. I don't know why. Arlen Ness told me Spearfish Canyon right here in South Dakota is the best place in the world to ride. He's ridden everywhere, but I do want to ride in Italy.
Okay, good one. All right, you're stuck in a garage for 12 hours doing a final assembly for a build. What band is cranking in the shop to get you through the grind?
Honestly, I'm such a huge Eric Church fan.
Okay.
Eric Church has spoken to so many moments in my life that, you know, while I love my 80s rock and I'm that kid, if I a lot of times I need calm in those moments, and Eric Church can calm me down.
All right, cool. Great answer. Great answer. All right. Craziest request you've ever had from a client, and did you actually build it?
Yes.
Do you remember what it was?
This lady was a stripper, and she wanted me to build her a Sportster chopper, and she wanted her picture to be on the chopper, but she wanted to be 15, 20 years younger.
Oh.
Right. And so that was weird. And she was so critical about the picture and about this airbrush this guy was doing. It really had less to do with me and more to do with her and the airbrusher and the dynamics of that and her husband and what he wanted in the picture and what she wanted in the picture. And I don't know, it's just weird.
That's funny. All right. What's your guilty pleasure for alcohol? And if you don't drink, what's your guilty snack?
I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Jack Daniels guy now. I wasn't. I was never a whiskey guy. And when I started working with Jack Daniels and building their bikes, you know, we'd go to dinner and they'd say, you know, you want a Jack and Coke? And I'm like, no, I really like Coca-Cola. Don't mess up my Coca-Cola.
Right.
If I'm going to have a bad day, you know it, because I'll have pizza and a Coke. And that's my reset. Okay.
Okay.
Right on.
All right. Good to know.
Pizza. I just am a pizza fan. And so,
yeah, I love pizza too.
But so I learned to drink Jack Daniels with ginger ale.
With ginger ale.
So so it's Jack and ginger.
Classic
is my
Jack
thing.
and ginger. Nice.
Yep.
Okay. All right. You've created what is the king of the windshield for motorcycles. What's one part you wish you also created?
You know, I wish at some point maybe that I would have created a frame that people would talk about, like Mark Rowe created an FXR frame. Kenny Boyce had an FXR frame. Donny Smith had his girder. Arlen Ness had tons of frames, right?
Yeah.
And it just, to be able to build a base or to create a base or have the brain to think of the base, the engineering side of it that those guys had, I just always admire that. You know, the Cosman chassis. I mean, you know, I see new kids like, you know, Joe Marshall and
yeah, he's a great builder.
Heeman, what's his name? First name? I was at Moon Eyes with him. The young Heeman kid. Anyway, he builds wicked frames. You know, Jesse James had the El Diablo frame. You know, I don't know. I just think it's cool.
Okay. That kind of leads to the next question.
Fan of, huh?
All right. You build a nice custom frame that's well known. Who out there currently are you very impressed with what they're doing building in the industry?
That Daniel Heeman kid, he built some incredible frames. He's come up with some really ingenious wheel designs and stuff. He builds cool stuff. I think Joe Marshall, his fit and finish is good. He has come a long way in his chopper game. I love to see him build old school choppers with just the best fit and finish. You know, he's come a long ways in that. John Jessup is putting together some incredible performance baggers, performance Road Kings, performance FXRs. And he himself is more leading a young team and inspiring, you know, the kids that work for him to be better builders, and I think that's cool.
Right. All
Um,
right.
you get a guy like John Lefevers is doing some cool paint work, and I could keep going. There's Jay Souza up at Fault Line Customs is building some really cool stuff right now, and I think you're going to see a couple cool bikes coming out from him in the next year that are unbelievable. Yeah, there's tons of guys.
Yeah.
It's
Right
it's
now, it's in good hands. We're in good hands with some of the
Yeah.
young talent coming up for sure. Best motorcycle you've ever owned or ridden?
I love my Cherry Bomb bobber. That bike it's a Springer. It makes me giggle. I still own it to this day. I have a Cherry Bomb Cadillac that matches it.
Nice.
And I just finished restoring an Arlen Ness Vision that has a cross country rear on it, and I love that bike. I have a 1998, the first year anniversary Road Glide, because that's the first one I cut apart.
Nice.
So now I have an actual original stock one. Um, I just like motorcycles. It don't matter.
Yeah.
I have a motorcycle problem.
That's a good. Hey, listen, that's a great problem to have. What's one non-motorcycle thing you're shockingly good at that no one really knows about?
This
The
speaking,
podcasting, speaking.
Mhm.
speaking
I
in
would agree.
general. I mean, I've spoke to 3,000 mortgage real estate guys. With me and Evander Holyfield,
Oh, cool.
I've spoke to 800 people at church services. I was a shy kid, right? So to now
Right.
be able to talk fluently like this and just to be able to handle it, it's a gift.
It's awesome.
hmm
Funniest guy in the hamsters that always makes you laugh.
Man, that's got to be Joe Pro.
Yeah.
Joe Pro is a longtime friend of Dave Perowitz's from Boston. He had brain cancer. So when he had brain cancer, he got this huge cut in his head, and he was always this jacked little muscle britches guy, but he's so loud, right? And he would scream across the room. Wait, it's not even screaming for him, it's probably his normal voice, right? But so damn loud. And he's like, Brian, brother, what's happening? Come on, baby, bring it in. He hugs you, just squeezes you to death. And the next time you see him, he'll have this long, crazy curly hair wig on, and he's riding his motorcycle with it. And he's just like, he's the funniest dude you're ever gonna meet, and you just can't even believe it. You're like, he slays a room. He can just, because he doesn't care. He just walks in
That's
and
cool.
he's, you know.
All right, that's awesome. Let's say tomorrow you retire. What's the one thing you're doing the next day that you've always put off because of running a business?
Taking my wife on a trip.
Okay, nice.
Nice. Good answer.
I'm a workaholic. I
You
probably won't retire. My wife Vanessa wants to go to Costa Rica. She knows all these cool places to go, and somehow I always find an excuse to bring it back to work. So if I really did retire ever, or I ever do just stop for a little bit, I'm gonna give everything I got to her.
That's killer. Great answer. All right, last one. Finish the sentence. When I'm riding on my motorcycle, I
Zone out. I sing to myself. I don't prefer audio. I have it
Me
in my
either.
Cardo, in my headset, the whole thing. But I prefer to just come up with goofy songs in my own head, even if I only remember part of the words. I will be riding long distance across the country on the Kyle Petty ride or something, and Vanessa's back there. She's got her phone all dialed in. She's working. She's listening to music. She's doing all the things, and I'm just singing. Eastbound and down, roll it up and trucking. We're gonna do what they say can't be done. We got a long ways to go and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound. Just watch this
That's
bandit
good.
run.
That's awesome,
yeah.
man. That's awesome. Brian, thank you so much, man, from the bottom
Yeah.
of our hearts. Thanks for taking the time, man. I know you got so much on your plate, and to give us these 2 hours, man, it's been awesome, man. So thank you very, very much. You got two humongous fans. We loved you before, man, but getting
Big
a chance
time.
to really talk to you,
It's been incredible.
awesome, brother.
Well, it's nice to spend the time with you guys again. If you ever get to Mitchell, South Dakota, we're just off exit 332. We're literally 5 blocks. Please stop in, especially if you're coming from the East Coast. You're going to Sturgis. You're coming right by our front door on I-90. We
Nice.
love to say hi. Everybody here will give you a tour, even if I'm not here.
That's cool.
We're happy to show you what's-
That's on the
That's super
that's on the
cool.
list of things to do for next summer. So
Come
it won't
see
be
us.
this
Come see
summer,
us.
but next summer,
Heck
100%.
yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
All right,
Well,
Brian.
you
Thank
guys.
you so
Thank
much,
you,
buddy.
Brian. Thank
All
you.
right, appreciate you.
Appreciate
Take care.
it.